council meeting for Tuesday, December 15. And first item of business is to adopt the agenda. Councillor Starr, Councillor Aaron, those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Thank you. And the adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of December 1st. Councillor Gamble and Councillor Reed. Errors or omissions? Hearing none. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. No report. Announcements. Is this being streamed or are we just reading it to ourselves here? Okay. The Municipal Hall closure, December 25 to January 10. We will reopen Monday, January 11 in 2021. Have a great Christmas and New Year, everybody out there. January 5th, 2021 regular council meeting is canceled, and the public attendance at council meetings until further notice. Members of the public are not permitted to attend council meetings in person. Regular council meetings are live streamed and recordings are available the following day. And see the council and committee's calendar at lakecountry.bc.ca/meetings for links. And until the provincial government says otherwise, and the federal government too, we adhere to the public health regulations and expect all of our citizens, constituents to do the same. And so face masks and stay healthy, and we'll get back to meetings that public can attend eventually. So, we don't have any public comment tonight because we have no public. So we get to development applications, and those with public comment, people can phone in and or have sent letters, and we do have all of that. So somebody presenting the development variance permit.
Yes, Your Worship, it's Blessy.
Okay. Good evening, Blessy. And
Hearing council, this variance application is for a property at 15738 Whiskey Cove Road. And it's 3 variances for the shape, length, and setback from the property line of the dock. The OCP is rural residential and the zoning is rural residential 3. This map shows the location of the property fronting Okanagan Lake, and it is 0.35 hectares in area. Closer aerial, and it also shows the existing dock. A couple of side images of the existing L-shaped dock. Site plan with the proposed dock overlaid over the existing dock. A side section of the proposed dock. In terms of the background, the owner was sent a notice by the province noting that unauthorized works had been completed, most likely between 2016 and 2018. All the existing lifts need to be removed as they're situated within the 5-meter setback to the upland property, and this is a provincial requirement, and or they're situated in water that is too shallow. The owners were informed by the province that they were to make an application to modify the docks to bring it into compliance, and the redesign has resulted in this variance application. The owner would also like to note, he has informed staff following the publication of the council report that the report notes, based on information provided by the applicant, that unauthorized pilings were put in. However, the owner would like to note that he has spoken to the province and clarified that no pilings were put in, but 3 unauthorized watercrafts were put in. In terms of the proposal, there is an existing L-shaped dock on the property, portions of which will be removed and rebuilt to accommodate the new configuration. And the overall dock structure will be approximately 130 meters square. The proposed dock is to accommodate 3 personal watercraft lifts and 1 4-post boat lift. The requested variances to the zoning bylaw are summarized as follows. The first is that the dock shall not extend a distance greater than from 40 meters. The variance is requesting that it shall not extend a distance greater than 42 meters from the natural boundary of the upland parcel. The second variance is that instead of a L or T-shaped dock, where the length parallel to the shoreline does not exceed 10 meters, they are instead allowed to build a U-shaped dock with the length parallel to the shoreline, not exceeding 13.4 meters. And the third variance is that instead of the setback from the side property line being a minimum of 3 meters, the applicant be allowed to build a dock with a minimum setback of 2.7 meters. This diagram illustrates the 3 variances for the length, for the side property line setback, and the shape of the dock. The applicant is requesting a variance to the setback from the side property line in order to allow them to utilize a portion of the existing dock. And the dock shape and dock length variances are being requested to satisfy the water depth requirement of 0.8 meters at low water while accommodating all the 4 lifts. And the 0.8 meters is met at 31 meter length from the natural boundary. The following are the CAO comments on the screen, and the CAO may wish to speak to them. Option A is that the 3 variances be approved, and option B is that the 3 variances be denied.
Anybody phone in? Okay, Rena?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have no one on the phone, but we do have the applicant, I believe, Aaron Serhan, in the meeting and available.
Okay, Councillor Scarrow?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a question. We had one of the letters that we received referred to a cherry farming operation that believes his intake is fairly close to that project site and concerns himself with the fact that it may be damaged and he would be responsible for the repair. I guess my question is through to Alberto. Can we protect this farm from that event and make the proponent liable?
Only if there is a violation of our regulations.
Say again, I don't understand.
So if there is a blatant violation of our regulation, yes, it can be liable for those events. If he has a business license or anything that can allow him to hold events on the property, I would say there is no problem there. But again, it has to be ascertained at the time of the event.
Well, I guess my concern is if we allow this construction to go forward and he does damage this man's water intake, which is apparently in the area, then this man's fruit crop and his livelihood may be seriously affected, and he may be up for a big cost. So I'm concerned for him.
So obviously, there is always a risk and liability that comes from these possibilities, these options, and whatever is built, can cause that. If that is the case, there are a number of ways that can be addressed. Obviously, in our case, it would go through a claim through our insurer. In the case of a neighbor, it could be the neighbor going to court and addressing that as a matter of recourse, I guess. So there are a number of issues, but it's not an easy.
Well, I'm not considering the district become liable. I'm only considering that the proponent of this project would be liable for any damage that he may directly cause to this other fellow's infrastructure.
Again, without preempting any possible court, I guess, or litigation, yes. Obviously, there is always a liability that stems from any construction that happens.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, what was it? Oh, Jamie would speak to that. I got you, Penny, but I'll have other speakers. Jamie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just very quickly, with respect to any impacts of the construction of the dock impacting any private lake intake water supplies, we can certainly note that and pass it along to the province, who also regulates both of those matters. So we can certainly note that and pass that feedback along when the province is considering the eventual approvals. And at the end of the day, the developer would take responsibility for any impact that they have to infrastructure that other people own, and that would be a civil matter for them to assure themselves of.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right, Cara?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councillor Reid.
Thanks, James. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bless you. I had one quick question. Actually, I have more than one question, but I lied. The width of the dock walkway on the plans, it varies between 1.5 meters and 1.8 meters. Just to clarify, it's not our bylaw for 1.5 meters, or is
The 1.8 meters is the existing portion. I
Right.
believe our bylaw, I would have to double check, I believe it's 3 meters. The provincial requirement is 1.5 meters currently. But because the existing portion is 1.8 meters, they are having to apply for a specific provision
okay.
versus a general provision.
Okay. So looking at it, I kind of have 4, possibly 5 variances. So one is the U shape from an L to a T. The other one is the maximum length from 10 meters to 13.4. Then we have the length and the side yard setback and possibly the walkway. I suppose my thoughts on this is the original dock length was 25.4 meters. And as the province have pointed out, or the ministry have pointed out, their concern is the placement of the personal watercraft, which need to be in a depth of 0.8 meters. And according to the applicant's plan, that depth can be met at 31 meters. So I have a problem with the dock length because there doesn't seem to be an actual need for that to go to 42 meters. Obviously, there are letters that we have in front of us which are concerned about the increase in length in comparison with the existing docks in the area, going from 25 to the maximum of 40. But under the bylaw, there's nothing we can do to stop it going to 40. But we can, if we wish to, say we don't want to grant the variance to 42. The side yard setback, I noted your comments about the province asking for a 5 meter setback for the personal watercraft, and to me, I think that makes a lot of sense. And the part of the problem with the width is caused by the applicant's desire to have the 2.7 meter side yard setback. So therefore, he has to put a kink into the dock to make it stretch across to then hit the province's requirement for a 5 meter setback for the personal watercraft placement. So again, this just seems like we're trying to cram a solution into a whole load of variances when we could just ask the applicant, with the removal of the dock entirely, to build it to the bylaw specification and meet the requirements of the province in terms of the environmental concerns that they have. So it just seems like we're trying to ram something from a square peg into a round hole, and it's not quite fitting for me in terms of what we're being asked to approve here. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And Councillor Gamble.
Oh, thank you. So I tend to agree with a lot of the comments that have been made, but I would like to hear from the applicant. The private lake intake, I have spoken in the past to the owner of that, David Geen, and he has a right of way that is on the south side of the lot that is directly to the north of Whiskey Cove Park. And I guess we've talked about, you know, if he could be if the proponent tonight could be liable. I think Mr. Geen raised the issue that he's had damage twice in the past to his lines, his water line that services his orchards, and the trouble is you'd have to be there 24/7 to actually identify the perpetrator of the damage. So, you know, this is, you know, I think what he's saying is, could you, you know, use a little foresight here? Because definitely, especially if there are personal watercraft, those tend to be really impacting water lines. If you're bringing water in that area. And my question, I guess, is what is the hardship? And I think Councillor Reid raised the issue there. I find it difficult to see why we would need to permit such a large U-shaped dock. I do recall when we set up these rules many years ago, well, not many, maybe 10 years ago, to have the L or T-shaped dock. And our mayor was here at the time, so he can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was there was much less impact on the foreshore and the environment by limiting these docks and not permitting these U-shapes, which of course will allow like 4 lifts, which is quite excessive for that, in my opinion. So that's it. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. Yes, certainly. If you have the applicant on the line.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, introduce yourself.
Yes, this is Aaron Sirhan from 15738 Whiskey Cove.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Gamble, did you want to hear from the applicant?
I would like to hear what he considers to be a hardship. Because mostly a variance, we would consider a variance based on hardship.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is to save, well, one is to utilize the dock that is there already to save putting a bunch of extra pilings and a bunch of environmental issues, if you so will. But we're, you know, wanting to be able to have our docks or our boat lifts put in there. I mean, I guess years ago, obviously the dock was grandfathered to be in there, but at that time they didn't have the permitted boat lifts, I guess, because we're too close to the neighbor's line. So the only way to correct it to utilize as much of the dock without putting a whole bunch more pilings and stuff in is to conform with the application that we put forward. And, you know, and I think, you know, did you have a letter of complaint? Is that what I heard there? Because somebody was saying that the dock is sticking out too far.
Yes, there were some letters of comparing it to the existing docks and just pointing out that the 42 meters requested seemed significantly longer.
Yeah, we won't be a whole bunch longer, but the neighboring docks on both sides of us are in very, very poor condition. And I think one storm and them docks will be wiped out. And what will then be the rules for them to rebuild? Will they be able to rebuild in the same footprint, or will they have to extend out to meet the 0.8 of a meter for their boat lifts? Because right now they are in far shallower water than what we are.
Thank you. Councillor Scarra, question.
Hey, thank you very much for being here, Mr. Serhan.
Yes. Oh, and then also one other thing, like the cherry farmer, his water intake line is quite a ways over. It's a property further to the south of us. It's more in the public beach area.
And it's usually by a public beach that the barges anchor up overnight, and that's where water intakes are. So that's the concern for the water intake, and that has to be addressed.
I haven't actually got a chance to ask a question yet.
Why wouldn't he be able to just anchor right out directly to the west of our dock? I mean, being it's a bay, it's kind of a unique, you know, versus, you know.
Except through private property.
So anyway, sir, where we park the barges is a question, that's for sure. The water intake can be damaged, but simply by boat traffic, not necessarily by your dock. One of the questions I have is, we've gotten two conflicting numbers. Do you reach 0.8 meter at 31.5 feet out, or do you have to go the full 42 meters out to reach 0.8 meters?
Well, it's to, I think, like, from where it starts to, if we have a boat there, so that you can have I mean, you got to have a dock around your, you know, to your boat, I think, because that's what requires the length of the dock. Your convenience.
So I guess I'm gonna just give you a little bit of my observations and some of the things that you've added to. The reason we have these restrictions on docks is because docks aren't just for the person who owns those docks. They also reflect in the view, if you like, of the shoreline from boats and traffic and tourists and things like that. So you're asking for 3 variances, which in my opinion is pretty excessive. And I kind of agree with Councillor Gamble. I'm not seeing hardship here so much as I'm seeing convenience, and that's not a reason that I would ever support a variance. So then the other thing you said was it's likely the docks to the south of you were going to be washed away at the next storm. So if we allow you to build this great big dock with 4 boats on the end of it in a U shape, that kind of sets a precedent for all those other docks that are going to be replaced in the next, you know, few years. So I'm having some trouble with this, sir.
But the docks, and then the docks to the south of us are probably double the length because of the shallow water. I mean, the further south you go, the further the docks keep going. And I mean, they're substantially, I don't know what the lengths of the docks are to the south of us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd just comment on that. They're not double the length for sure. They do have to be longer because it is substantially shallower in that bay. Yeah, I'm kind of, the one variance for the side yard setback, I'm kind of there because I mean, environmentally, I don't want to take the pilings out. I do see Councillor Reed's point though in saying, let's just do it right so that we have the right setbacks for everybody at the beginning. Other than that, I don't think that there's any reason to vary the length or the width. 40 meters is plenty. Looks like the you can easily achieve the depths that you need to achieve. You know, facing the facts of the matter is that when it's low water, it's now. Nobody's boats are being used now. So, you know, that's a bit of a red herring as far as I'm concerned. The other concern being the Mr. Gein's concern, it's quite valid, because what happens is the only way you can anchor the barge is by running it up on the beach and pinning it to the bottom. That's how they do it. They're too big to be anchored on a lake like ours that has no protection. So what happens is, if they try to do that, the barge will drift, tear out the water lines, and it's all well and fine to say that they'll be responsible. But what happens to the actual person that happens? And it happened in my community, where it ripped out a water line that was for 7 homes late on a Friday night. They didn't get water restored to their area until Monday. They had to pay all up front. The dock company, which is not this dock company, they held it up and then finally said, okay, but we'll refer it to our insurance. So it took these people 2 years to get their money, because there was fighting between the insurance agents. And the insurance agents depreciated a brand new water system by $10,000. This water system was only 1 month old, and they depreciated it $10,000 for use, which is almost half of the cost of it. So, I mean, there's got to be some sort of protections for people in these sort of situations, because it's not good enough to say, you know, it's going to impact Mr. Gein if it happens, period, unless there's some sort of mechanism in there to protect them. So, you know, and that's just the case. Now, reading through the plan, I think it's fairly easy to notify the dock company, and I noted that it is a much more responsible company than the company that tore out those other water lines, because that company no longer exists. But yeah, I don't, I could support the variance for the side yard, unless I could be persuaded otherwise, because I just don't want to see the environmental cost of removing the old piles. But I can't support the width of or the length.
Thank you. Councillor Reid. Oh, before I get you, I'd like to ask a question of the applicant as well. I'm sort of on side with Councillor Ireland, but at 40 meters and pulling the U shape back to where you would have a fewer meter connection, or even if straight onto the U, you would almost be at 40 meters and use as much of the old dock to run it straight out. And if you have the depth to put the boats on, you may have to angle it or offset it a bit to get more distance between your property, your north property line and the U, but I don't see why it couldn't be pulled back to almost straight to the old, as much of your using of the old dock as you can without that 1.5 meter walkway to the east side of the U. So why is that not part of your plan?
You know, it was just the dock builder basically did up the design, and I just thought they built everything to satisfy the requirements. So I really can't answer that. No,
if they satisfied the requirements, there wouldn't be 3 variances being asked. But some of the variances are, as Councillor Ireland said, it makes sense in that you don't want to be putting more pilings in that when there's perfectly good ones there. But a lot of the rest of the design could come closer to what our bylaw says. So that's something for you to ponder. Councillor Reid has a question or comment.
It's more of a Penny. Oh, sorry. Yes. So I think there is room to bring it back a bit, because the position of the dock of the boat lift to the south is on the 31 meter to get the depth in there. But there's a 3-meter kind of walkway there. So you technically could pull that dock back in by that width of the walkway by 3 meters, which would make it compliant with the bylaw in length and still be able to place your southern boat lift or personal watercraft lift at the 31 meters mark, because it would be aligned with the one to the north. However, the problem with the side yard set or the side property line setback is that you still have to meet the province's requirements of setting by 5 meters from the property line with the personal watercraft. So that's the thing that's driving that angle, which is therefore driving the width. And even if you bring it back in length, you're still going to have the same angle from the old dock to the new dock, which is going to give you still that 13.4 meters. The one thing I don't think I have a problem with is the U-shaped dock. I can see that. So I'm thinking if we went back to the drawing board and pulled the whole thing back by 3 meters, which would make it 39 meters, then perhaps that's going to that would lessen potentially the impact of the dock. But I would still like to see if we could keep it to the 10-meter width. How that's done, it may mean that you lose, we have a less wide physical dock to compensate for it. So the overall width is still 10 meters, but just the physical presence of it maybe needs to be adjusted. So I think there are ways to address those two main concerns, but it might need a redesign. So maybe it's a deferral.
Okay, Councillor Gamble?
Yes, but I'm waiting until we're finished with the applicant. I would like to debate this. I don't want to debate this with the applicant.
I have Councillor Arlen.
Yeah, further to Councillor Reid's comments, I mean, the personal watercraft lifts, they could be moved. They don't need to be there. There's lots of places to put them. Personal watercraft don't take up any depth of water. They wouldn't draw more than 6-7 inches. So they don't need to be where it's deep. You need the depth for that. But they could be easily moved. They could be on the inside of the U. They could be, there's lots of places they could be. So, you can move them to the other side. You can have a different kind of, there's lots of different systems there. But to remove them from that side where the neighbors are would be the best solution for sure. Okay. That's up to the applicant.
Okay. All right. Councillor Scarrow.
Well, I think we're debating now, so Councillor Gamble should jump in when she wants to. But I am not in favor of the U-shape. I feel that that's a step into new territory in a very vulnerable bay, and I just don't feel that that's appropriate at this place.
Okay, thank you.
If I might.
Yeah, Councillor Gamble. Yeah.
Yes, I would agree. I would not be supporting this variance or the variances because I, first of all, do not believe it is a hardship. I think it is very close to our park as well. I think the size is excessive, especially when it angles. I don't want to engineer it. I don't believe that I'm the specialist, so I'm not going to worry about engineering it. But I think that before going to support a U-shaped dock, I would have to see more rationale for that. I don't see the rationale for that. It's convenience, but it doesn't meet, in my opinion, it's not meeting the environmental protection that we wanted to achieve with having the T or the L-shaped docks that we have required. And I know that we've made some changes from that, but I know that we're also having a second look at that. So, and the other thing that has made me feel that I would not support this is that there is a distinct possibility that there would be an impact on the water line that the farmer has. And that is right adjacent to Whiskey Cove Park. It is actually right beside it. I swim there, so I know. I know exactly where it is.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Councillor Ireland?
Yeah, the one thing I would support is I do support the U shape. I don't think it's the shape. is now, when you had the L or T shapes, because that's how everybody built them. And that's just the way it was. There was no U shape when that rule was put in. So we've had numerous U shapes. It protects the boat better. It's easier for everybody to use, which is good because a lot of people, and I mean, not talking about this applicant, but there's many people out there that have a difficulty with their boats and docks and that sort of thing. So in terms of the U shape, I support the U shape. I just don't support the size, the width or the length, and I think it could be redone. Councillor Reed brought up a good point about a deferment to work with the applicant to get it right. I'm okay with that. If we can work together to get the right solution, that's probably the best way to go.
Okay. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do agree with those last comments. I too don't have a problem with the U shape. And I do have a problem with the width though. So it would be kind of nice to make this work in the footprint using what we have. So.
Okay. Take a motion. Oh, Councillor Koza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I just wanted to three-peat and just say that's my sentiment as well, that I have no problem with the U-shape, especially from a boater's standpoint, that it protects your boat, especially over in Okanagan Lake where there's large waves and high winds and stuff, so it would help keep the boat safer within the confines of the U-shape. But it's just the overall length and the other two variances that I don't go with, so I'd go with the other two and saying that I'd go with that.
Do you want to, then we defer to staff to come back with something a little more in compliance with Councillor Scarrow and Councillor Reed? Yes, Councillor Arlen?
Yeah, the only thing is that it's the side yard setback. It's the setback to the side of the neighbors. So we have to sit here and say, okay, if we want everything to match, we can't make that match unless we make them take it out.
No, and we don't want to take
and
it out.
I personally don't think that we should be taking it out if we can avoid it. I mean, I do understand there's a rationale to say, let's do it right to begin with.
Closer to compliance.
But environmentally, it makes no sense to take it out. And, as far as water concerns, I think that, we just have to make communication. I mean, if we were to say that we're not going to build any docks because of existing water lines, then we wouldn't have a single dock in Cars Landing whatsoever. So that there's not a strong rationale to ban that. There's just a rationale to make sure that we communicate it properly and that the applicant is communicating it properly and working with legitimate companies who do the right thing.
Okay. Councillor Reed.
So can I just kind of paraphrase where I think we're at? Are we saying are we asking the applicant to go back to staff to work with a dock design that meets the district bylaws in terms of length and width, but we are prepared to accept a variance subject to Councillor Gamble's comments and us voting on it, possibly a variance to the U shape and to the side yard setback, but that has to be delivered in the context of a compliant dock width and dock length.
So, Your Worship, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
It's probably want to make it a little simpler than that and give a little more option to staff to work with the applicant. Refer back to staff to work with the applicant to come up with technical solutions to avoid the two variances dealing with the length and the parallel length in the application.
Okay.
So basically, we're addressing the 42 and the 13.7. Whether or not you would accept the U-shaped dock, that would be part of the discussion when it comes back.
Right.
And this would leave the 2.7 meters within the option of the resolution.
Good. Thank you. I'll get Councillor Reed. That's part of her motion.
Sorry, yes, I just want to make sure that we're compliant. The applicant will be compliant with the 5-meter setback as well. I think we just need to be careful of unintended consequences in making the entire dock length offset by 2.7 meters, because what we've got at the moment, the reason for the 2.7 is only there up to the point at where the existing dock finishes. So I just don't want to kind of end up with a dock that's entirely reduced setback,
Okay.
so.
They can draw the line differently, yeah.
So we got it. It's, I put a note on the motion there.
So
Okay.
Alberto's recital of the motion to defer makes a lot of sense. But on the other hand, if we as a council are okay with the side yard request and okay, as a majority looks like is with the U, why don't we just grant those two variances and deny the others? I just don't see the difference myself.
Cost. I think it's better to work with people. I mean, my personal opinion is it's better to work with them and try to get it right. Instead of him going back and coming back and then we go back. Let's work together to get it compliant within the rules that we have.
Well, that's what I mean, sir. He wouldn't have to come back if he knew already what variances we're prepared to accept and which variances we aren't. It would be finished.
I think it's complicated.
Yeah.
Okay, just a thought.
Okay. The motion was, do you have that?
Second.
Alberta?
Yes, to refer back to staff to work with the applicant to come up with technical solutions to address the two variances dealing with length and parallel length and compliance with the 5 meter setback.
Good.
We don't need at this point, I don't think we need a date for this to come back because obviously we have to work with the applicant
Yeah,
to find the solutions.
right.
Second.
Okay. Councillor, you moved it? I did. And Councillor Ireland second. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right. That deals with that. Another variance. Who's doing this one? Oh, Paul. Good evening, Paul.
Can you turn on the mic, please? Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship. Some have said I may not need a microphone. Oh, yes. Your Worship and Council, this evening we have in front of us variance file BVP 2020-014, Robert. The zoning is RU1 single family housing. The OCP has a future land use designation of urban residential. And the address is 15828 McDonough Road. The subject this evening is a development variance permit and specifically the height of a fence on top of a retaining wall. You'll see here that it's just off of Cal Lake, just above Trask Road here. And it's this property here. This doesn't show it well, but there's actually a walkway here, public walkway, to get residents down towards this way. The subject property is 0.177 hectares, which equates to 0.291 acres. This is an aerial. It's not that up to date because there is currently a building there, but it does give you an idea of the lot as it was created. The zoning and OCP designation, as noted, is RU1 and urban residential. So this evening, the applicant is requesting two specific variances to the same clause, essentially. One for the north property line and one for the south property line. So in the case of the south property line, the applicant is asking that the height of a retaining or a fence on top of a retaining wall be increased from 2.0 meters to 2.54 meters. And in the case of the north property line, that's actually a little bit bigger, and they're requesting from 2 meters to 2.92 meters. So we do have some site photos here at the site. I guess that would have been last week. This is the development sign on the chain link fence that's on the public walkway. You can see here, here's the retaining wall. We're really talking about this section in here where this is as long as it can be. It could be a little bit in here. I wasn't there with the tape measure, but the drawings, if we just go back here, you can kind of see it's this whole section in here. So wherever it exceeds the 2 meter mark. And so this is the opposite side of the building. This would be the south side of the building. And again, the very same thing. And I'll just do this again. You can see here, they've actually got the whole span for the whole north property line. And that's probably safe because I would argue that down here probably isn't required. But that being said, this is definitely, I stood beside this and that's pretty high. I'm kind of short too, so. So the applicant applied for building permits for new single-family dwelling and a swimming pool. It was not identified that a variance was required for height of a fence on top of a retaining wall at that time. We've pulled the building permits today, and it's quite interesting. They have the fence shown, but no retaining walls, no deck. So the building permit was devoid of some information on initial submission. In an email dated April 17th of 2020, the applicant provided new information, which led to the determination that a variance would be required. So we did grant occupancy for the single-family dwelling, but not for the pool. And our building inspector was very clear that the pool was not to be used until occupancy was granted, mainly because of safety concerns. The reason for the fence is it's a requirement under the BC Building Code after children have drowned in pools. So we're trying to avoid that as a safety precaution. So on July 30th of 2020, we did get, somehow we're informed, and a bylaw contravention ticket was issued, essentially because the pool was being used contrary to the order from the building inspector. The development variance permit was received on August 21st of this year and considered complete on September 18th. The applicant is requesting, as I've already noted, on both the south and property lines, to a maximum height on the north side of 2.92 meters. So the applicant has provided rationale noting that the fence is required to restrict access to the pool, and in actual fact, as noted, it is a requirement of the BC Building Code to have a fence around a pool now. But they also noticed that because of the height of the retaining wall, it also presents a safety concern due to fall protection. So the fence would also be a safety feature in that regard. The CAO has noted, I am again disappointed that we have to deal with the variance after the fact. The fence has already been erected. The builder knows the rules and decided to build the fence anyway. I will leave this to council, but at some point, this particular issue of variance applications being submitted after the fact needs to be addressed or at least explored. Your worship, option A for council is that the development variance permit for the subject property varying the retaining wall at the north property line from 2 meters to 2.92 meters be approved, and that the development variance permit for the subject property be approved, thereby varying the height of a fence on top of a retaining wall at the south property line from 2 meters to 2.54 meters. And alternatively, as an option B, is your worship, the council would deny the request.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, your worship.
Raina, anybody online, any public?
No, your worship, not at this moment, but I will check with William upstairs. We have one of the applicants or applications, Jennifer, first time on the line.
All right. Any council questions for the applicant, Councillor Reid?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. Jennifer,
She has to identify herself.
Oh, sorry.
So everybody can hear that's streaming or whatever.
The battery died.
Oh. Jennifer, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Could you say your name and your address for the record?
Jennifer Berkheim, 11280 Stillwater Court.
Thank you. And are you the agent for the applicant?
I am.
Okay. So my question would just be, why the order, can you explain why the things proceeded in the order they did with the building work being completed and before the variance was actually submitted?
Yeah, so the pool fence was always on the application because we know we need a pool fence. However, we were trying to work with the grades on the property to minimize any retaining required, but due to the steep slope that you can see on the public walkway on the north side of the property, it was kind of unavoidable to get any sort of usable backyard space. The slope back there is quite steep, so we tried to do our best to minimize retaining, keep them all under 4 feet. So we did step the retaining walls to keep them both at 4 feet. And we did keep the fence basically where we proposed it. We did decide to extend it just to keep access to the property from any other people than the ones who live there to a minimum. But we did actually inquire and we did go back and forth quite a bit, and it's just kind of unavoidable. The fall from a 4-foot retaining wall is more of a concern than the access, because with the 4-foot retaining wall, you are stopping access into the pool area. So most of the fence is more required for fall protection.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Questions? Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for being available for us to ask questions. So when I go by this property, I walk by it quite often actually. Is that fence, just to clarify, is that fence the actual development fence or the district's fence?
The one along the walking path?
Yes.
The chain link fence is provided by the district, and then the ornamental black fencing on the retaining walls are provided by us.
Yeah, okay, so where exactly is the property line there? Can you maybe enlighten us?
I'd say, I don't have the survey in front of me, but it's right on the retaining wall. Like, we are right up to the property line.
So the retaining wall is on the property line, that's what you're suggesting?
Yeah, it's on our side of the retaining wall, or on our side of the property line, but we're as close as we can be to it.
So I take it that does not, that is good with our building code then?
Through your worship, so any retaining wall that doesn't require a building permit is, for all intents and purposes, considered landscaping. So in this case, because they did keep the retaining walls under that height, 1.5 is a variance of council, as council is well aware, but 1.2 does trigger a building permit. So in this case, they built the retaining wall right on the property line, and our zoning would support that.
So now, when I go to the neighbor's house and stand in their place with the fence on the top here, you're actually blocking, partially blocking lake view with that fence, the top of it. So that's the biggest issue I have with that, and walking down that pathway, you definitely are blocking the view again. And now if I go around and go stand on the lot that it will be built at some point, that's also blocking out that mountain view there. So I'm struggling with this one a little bit. I realize it's built and stuff already, but I look at that, and the one along the walkway I have big issues with. If I go around to the other side, there's no neighbor there. That lot hasn't been built yet. So that one doesn't concern me so much. I get the safety aspect to that, and it's not disruptive of anybody's view. But the one by the pool, you know, you're right beside the fence. Like I say, I would struggle to watch my cat walk between the fence and that line there. So, you know, I have issues with that, and I'm just curious what you would do if we ask, if we deny this variance, whether you're going to be able to pull that down and you'd put it inside that, what we're saying, or how would you would you fix that if we deny this?
I mean, if you're gonna move that fence over further to the south, you're gonna start impeding on the house footprint now. And also on the pool area, we need to have a suitable walking path around the entire pool to make it a safe area to use. Moving that any closer to the pool would stop that from happening. Also with that being, like you can see right through that fence, I don't really know where from the neighboring property it's going to obstruct lake views. From their backyard is where they're going to be sitting on their property. And I mean, anything you construct within your backyard, whether it's landscaping, trees, whatnot, is.
Well, that's a very commonly used walkway. There's lots of people that take their dogs and ride their bikes and so on. And, you know, as I walk down there, you know, you have an obstructed view. You know, any of the pictures on the presentation clearly show you have an obstructed view. So us that live by the lakes, which is most of us in this community, kind of like the lake view. So that's where I'm struggling, because this definitely obstructs that. You know, if it was inside the line, that's one thing. But when it clearly you add it on top of that other fence, you know, I'm taking, nobody's there in that neighborhood that I've talked to are too excited about that. So they all don't think that's a good idea. So that's why I say, you know, when I look at the pool, I see you have a fence already that comes out to the end of the pool, and then it jogs over to cause this variance problem, and then it goes up the line. So actually, if you went straight instead of jogging over, you do have that same gap that you have at the end of the pool. So I think the problem comes in by this extra jog here for some reason, trying to accommodate more for whatever that is on the end there. So like I say, I'm struggling with this one. It's definitely something there that you know, if this was coming to us beforehand, I would probably, you know, have that change ahead of time, and I wouldn't allow this. So now that it's done already, that's the only part I'm struggling with, is the fact that it is done. But you know, I'm leaning towards not approving this myself.
Councillor Scarrow.
I agree completely with Councillor McKenzie. I'm really upset about granting forgiveness rather than permission. And based on that, I probably will not support this variance.
Yep. Councillor Reid?
I would agree with Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Scarrow. I would maybe suggest looking at it as two separate variances. I think we have more of an issue on one side than the other, depending on people's views on the forgiveness aspect, because they're both in that same situation. I completely support Councillor Scarrow's comments on that note. I would be open to the variance on the south side, but I agree with Councillor McKenzie's comments and possible solution on the north property line to mitigate what's already happened to the view, and maybe bringing it back closer to the pool, which would open up what's been closed off a little. But again, it does have an impact there. So I would be happy with the south, but not with the north as it currently stands.
Okay. Not yet. Councillor Cozen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say I agree with the other three that I can't support this. It's one thing to come forward with a development and permit, but it's another thing to complete the works and then come to us afterwards. The CAO comments were that this isn't legally precedent, but it's a moral precedent. And if we approve this, what message will it send to the community on what developer can do to us? So I don't support this in any way.
Okay, thank you. No more Councillor Arnold.
Yeah, I just have a question. As I went out there and looked at it, but I didn't walk down the trail. So just looking at that jog, I mean, Councilor McKenzie can probably answer this question for me. Is that a gateway and stairs that go down to the lower part of their property? Yeah, I'm just asking what it is. I'm just having a look and saying, okay, trying to understand the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of caught up there. I mean, I don't like granting a variance after the fact more than anybody. I do agree with Councilor Reed. There's not a lot of option on the other side of the building. I mean, this is mostly because of the way they've chosen to modify the lot and build retaining walls to do those things that, you know, there's going to force the next door neighbor to the south in their lot. Even if we grant that variance, the next door neighbor is going to be forced to elevate his lot too. And we're probably not going to allow him to do that because we don't want to see that happen. So, you know, moving the fence over here might help to mitigate it a bit. It's certainly not going to solve. I mean, there has to be a fence there at some point. There just has to be. But moving it over, you know, would open it up a little bit. So I could certainly support that part.
Well, certainly it's easier to cut it off than build it up. And the variance is to allow it to be higher than the 2 meters, but 2 meters is high enough for any kind of security purposes. So, Councillor.
Are you prepared to accept the motion, sir?
Yes.
I'd make a move, as Councillor Reid has suggested, that we support the south side variance and not support the north side variance.
Councillor Gamble?
I would support that. I would second that.
Okay.
I think that's a reasonable thing. I agree with all the comments that have been made. You know, it strikes me really unfortunate and almost really disrespectful of the process that pool was not located in a place that would not cause these issues to arise.
Thank you. So the variance
Support the south variance, but not the
north is south side approved, north side not?
That's the motion on the table, Your Worship.
Is that the motion?
That's the motion, yes.
Okay.
Support the variance on the south side, but not on the north side of the
All right.
property.
Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next one up. Development. Yeah.
Well, it does to the next door, and the person who goes next door, they're gonna have to elevate their house too.
Next. You're doing the next one?
The microphone.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is quite a lengthy presentation, so put on your seatbelts. We're going to try to cover off everything that we did for council on November 17th, as well as clarify some facts. And there was a bunch of information that was presented today that I will also draw council's attention to. So any notifications that have come in, council has been provided with those from people that may have concerns in relation to the variances. This is a development permit. This is actually a development permit with a variance, but as we are restructuring, we are creating 2 files. So you'll see DP 2020-010-C and DVP 2020-018. These are together. The zoning bylaw is DC3, Direct Control 3, Lakestone. The OCP has this area as urban residential. The address for the property is 9652 Benchland Drive. This is a development permit with variances, and the development permit is for multi-unit, commercial, wildfire, drainage and erosion, greenhouse gas reduction, and energy conservation. The variances, as requested, are to increase the building height from 4 to 6 stories. Also 16.5 meters to 19.2 meters, as council may recall. At the last meeting, there were some inconsistencies and staff came with 18 when it was actually 19.2. So we worked with the applicant to clarify that. And we're looking to decrease the setback for an off-street loading space. The front yard setback for that is 6 meters, and they're requesting it to be to 0 meters. I would like to mention that the applicant is online and wishes to do a presentation following staff presentation, as they did in the previous meeting, and they would be more than willing to answer any questions that the council may have. So the location here, as you can see, it is smack dab in the middle of the benchlands. Some people would call this like an anchor site in commercial industries. It's a subject property. It's 0.774 hectares, or equivalent to just under 2 acres. It's kind of like the gem of that particular subdivision. I think they designed it that way, as envisioned by the Lakestone Master Plan. So you can see here that it has the aerial. Again, size of the property. I would like to point out that as a part of, we'll go over this a little bit later, but as part of subdivision, the approving officer at that time made sure to protect the natural environment as well as this gully and the trees in this area. So those are all under a no build, no disturb covenant. And council has been concerned with tree removal more recently. So that is a tool that we have been using until such time that the director brings forward some tree or vegetation strategy, I believe. This is the site plan as proposed. You'll see here, we've got a parallel building here, and then this is horizontal. It is split into 2 buildings. You can't see it here, but there's a walkway or a promenade that connects the 2 buildings. These are the elevation drawings as they relate to the development permit. So you do have your east elevations here. You can see the promenade as I discussed. You can see the permeability of the site as the applicant has noted. And again, down here, this is actually from the backside. You can see the pool here. This is what the back of the building would look like. This front's a gully and is relatively, I wouldn't say unseen, but compared to other aspects of the building, it's not as visible. The elevation drawing here is the south elevation and the north elevation. And because of the complexities of this building, they have provided cross sections of internal elevation. So we've included those in the development permit as well. You will see here, the developer has gone under significant expense potentially, if council were to approve this project, to provide parking in an underground assortment. That is not done very often in Lake Country whatsoever. It may be one of our, maybe not, if not the first, one of the first that we've seen where they're going to do full subsurface parking. Typically, subsurface parking is reserved for usually 10 stories or more. So we see here a rendering of the materials and colors that they would like to use. They're using a lot of wood, they're using a lot of stone, high quality materials. Yeah, there's nothing on here that I would say would be cheap in any way, shape, or form, and definitely meets the objectives or the guidelines of the official community plan. The landscape concept plan here, it is a fairly large site. They've done quite a good job. I didn't include all the drawings. You will notice the development permit actually has more information, but I've included what I thought was pertinent here. So this is just an overall site plan showing the landscaping, conceptual plan. This I thought was important to council. This is the restrictive covenant area. You can see that they're protecting all these trees. These exist there and will remain there. The developer specifically designed this, in fact, they were explaining to us, to make sure that this promenade here had a lake view in between the tree protection, so everyone in the building can potentially have a lake view if they go for a walk through their building. And this is a planting plan. It's too small to read, but so much as to say went through. It is xeriscaped, it is low water use, drought tolerant. And the amount associated with that is quite significant. So this is what the developer is asking for in terms of the area variance for the height. This is the highest point from average grade on all elevations. So of course, we're not going to show all elevations. This is essentially to change the zoning bylaw DC3 zone for height from 16.5 meters or 4 stories to 19.2 meters or 6 stories. Additionally, due to site constraints, as well as the fact that they're providing underground parking, this is the ramp here. So the height of underground parking is typically quite low and wouldn't meet a loading space requirement. Otherwise, they would try to put the loading space underneath. But that'd be quite expensive for them to raise the underground parking a couple inches to make that. And it's not very versatile in terms of the commercial space. So they're looking for something that will be more feasible for their needs. And they're asking council to approve a front yard setback reduction from 6 meters to 0 meters. And it is kind of like a drive out, drive in, drive out. Our manager of planning made a very good point today. I was thinking purely commercial. People need to move in. This is a great place for them to pull up their moving truck and access the building from the front. This is Benchland Drive view southeast. I'm going to kind of go through these. They're all very similar, but they give you an idea of the stature, I would say, as well as the quality of the architecture that they're trying to propose for council. It's from an architectural standpoint, there's lots of breakups in the facade. You know, wispy overhangs. Typically, from an architectural perspective, this is considered to be well designed, generally. Council had some concerns in relation to what a building like this might look like from the lake. And so the applicant has provided a lake view rendering. In talking with Reese from the architectural firm, this is actually on the lake. So if you're on a boat on the lake, this is what that would look like. It does remind me, it's somewhat sensitive and reminds me of what's going on at UBCO right now and how they are stepping buildings kind of into the hillside a bit. They're still not perfect, they're still visible, but they're not as obtrusive as some of the stuff you see in Vancouver on the North Shore and the lake. So at the last meeting on November 17th, we did have some concerned citizens that own properties in the area. So the developer has taken it upon themselves to address the difference in the views based on this. So what they did is they provided some visuals from lot 1 up here in this direction approximately. And this is what they're saying here. This would be a 4-story. And you can see here that it doesn't completely cut off the lake view, but it does start to top these trees here. So the height increase kind of brings the top here. So that's from lot 1, so that's higher up on the hill. I believe there was a comment that it may restrict lake view. It does a bit for sure. It doesn't restrict the whole view, provided that those are accurate renderings as well. I have to say that. Again, concerned citizen from, sorry, let's go back here. Concerned citizen was concerned with what the impact might be on their property. And so here, this is the property here, lot 38. This is give or take the view that they tried to provide. And you can see here at 4 stories, that's right about there. It's interesting because this was roughed in a little bit, I think, because this 4 is about here, and then I see this is a bit higher, but they really notched this up. And so you can see it goes from these trees being exposed in this hillside to pretty much you're not seeing that hillside anymore. And it's starting to approach the top of this tree. So proposal comparison for council. The Lakestone Master Plan has a residential unit count envisioned of 88 units. The applicant has said that whether they build a 4-story or a 6-story, they're going with 86 units. Commercial space, the Lakestone Master Plan has envisioned 600 feet squared of commercial space. At a 4-story option, they can definitely provide that. A 6-story option is 10 times the amount at 6,000 feet squared. Retail commercial frontage, as it relates to that, we jumped from 4 stories at 60 feet of retail frontage to 230 feet. So a lot more presence of retail in the public realm, and I'm assuming in the public areas there'll be like cafes and the like. So a little bit more. Public outdoor area, the Lakeshore Master Plan has nothing envisioned. At 4 stories, they could provide 1,500 feet squared, but with a height variance and reducing the building envelope and not meeting all the setbacks, they can provide 7,800 foot squared of public open space. Not all of that, my understanding is available to the public. Some of it will be for the building, but it does speak to the overall impact of the building on the site. Lot coverage, the Lakestone Master Plan calls for 40%. 4-story option would max out that coverage essentially at 39%. That would be 97.5% of the max. And a 6-story would only use 27% of the lot coverage and only 67.5% of the max. So again, speaking to this idea of less impact on the overall site. Parking stalls, Lakestone Master Plan envisions 149, a 4-story option and a 6-story option because it's the same number of units. There's a slight variation because the commercial space is slightly lower, but it's nominal, so I didn't add it. So 152 is what's required for both. They're going to provide 158. And facade permeability, or from an architectural standpoint, how much breakup, how much view. If you're standing on the street, can you actually see through the building in certain areas? The 4-story option, it's 0%. You will not be able to see through that site from the tennis courts, but with the 6-story option, you will see 19% potentially, depending on where you're at. Height in feet, 16.5 meters, which equates to 54.13 feet. And they're asking for an increase to 19.2 meters or 62.99 feet. It's really just under 10 feet. This just gives, they're trying to provide some material for council so you can envision the differences between the 4 and the 6-story. These are massing comparisons. So what's interesting here is that a 4-story is quite huge on the site. It's the whole site. This kind of breaks it up a little bit here and here. Another interesting rendering or trying to show the impacts is if a man is sitting here at the north property line and a 4-story option goes to the setback, when he looks up, he actually sees less. A 6-story option is back here, so he actually sees more. He gets more of the sky on that end because they're pulling the building that far back off the property line. And there is a, by the way, a nature walkway in there as well. So massing aerial again just shows the areas that would be built at a 4-story option there in red, and with a 6-story option, the areas that they get to provide. This will be mainly be commercial, like I guess coffee, probably patios, and it's right next to a park. And I've got some pictures showing how that may complement that park potentially. And again, pulled off here and a little bit of permeability through the middle of the site. I don't believe this is going to be very public, as the infinity pool is back here and will be strata more than likely. And they do have, I believe, a fire pit envisioned and some other nice landscaping features. So we did hear that there may be some concern from Tyndall Road as to what the elevation change would be there. So Jamie showed me a couple tricks I was not aware of with Google, and it's showing that there's about a 9-meter elevation difference. So I'll have to practice on that a bit more, but it's a neat trick. So from the Tyndall Road here to the site, 9 meters. If you consider what I said about 59 feet, then you're probably just see kind of the halfway of the building kind of upwards. And I also have some pictures that I specifically took for a reason. So this is at the edge of Tyndall Road, right up to the edge. And you can see the site quite a bit here. So if you're standing here and hanging out, you're definitely going to see this building quite a bit more than if you're across the street. You barely even see the courts here from across the street. So it would be less of an impact if you're across the street, but there would definitely be an impact on the side directly adjacent to the site. So this are pictures from the park. So this is a district park for Lakestone. This is the site here. So as noted, you know, they're proposing that they provide more public space adjacent to the park. And here is right on the site facing the tennis courts. Typically, if the building was built here, unless you were in the infinity pool with the straight shot, you probably wouldn't even see this. I wanted to show council, they've already marked out. So these are surveyor pins. So boom, right there, right there, right there. So they've marked out the full restrictive covenant, and you can actually see it says IP covenant on here. So they've marked out where they can't disturb because they will not be removing those trees. This just shows the north neighbor from across the field. And this is right around the covenant area. And there is a walkway on this side as well that goes down here. So there is a minor buffer between the property and the adjacent property. Very typical to what we just looked at 15828 McDonough. So the background: on March 26th of 2015, DP 2014-031 was issued for the subdivision, and that was S 2015-002 of the Benchlands neighborhood, and as envisioned by the Lakestone Master Plan. There was 2 amendments to that development permit for various reasons over that time. One on December 15th of 2015, the other on March 8th of 2017. To protect the natural environment and trees, as noted, there's a restrictive covenant. A meeting was held on December 10th, 2019, and the applicant presented their conceptual plan for development and brought it to council, and it's kind of like a strat session. I believe we had that day, and they came and spoke with council and just showed some preliminary drawings and asked some questions about whether or not council would be in support of something like this. I'm not sure we said council really indicated, but we took in the application based on that meeting. Variance DVP 2018 was brought forward to council on November 17th, as you probably recall, and there was a discrepancy in the height. So we did go back and check the documentation, and there were some discrepancies in the application. So we worked with the applicant to straighten that out right away. And 19.2 is absolutely the number. After work with the applicant to standardize the request, staff is now bringing this forward to council. And as noted, instead of just the variance, this is a development permit with variances. So it's the full meal deal. If council were to approve this, the applicant potentially could move towards building permit after paying securities and the like. So as noted, they're looking for variances as shown previously. The density of the site is not changing regardless of the variance being proposed. A total of 86 units will be built on this site by the applicant. The traffic impact has been envisioned by the Lakestone Master Plan because, as noted, it was for 88 units, and so they're actually a little bit under. And the site, when subdivided has been fully serviced to be able to have this type of density as per our bylaws. And so today, I'd like to commend our planning technician, Michael Zarni, for pointing out something that came to his attention and was very helpful to us in addressing council, even though I was like, oh, no. But so he was able to identify, when I did do the analysis, I had taken the bylaw off of our website and not the forms that we've done internally, which meant that I used the 22 meters per square meter calculation. In actual fact, the bylaw calls for a 2% increase per year, rounded up to the next $10. So what that has meant is, since that bylaw has been enacted in 2020, it's pretty much $10 a year that fee has gone up. So from 22 it went to 30, from 30 it went to 40, now it's 50, it will be 60 on January 1st. So this is a significant hit. We didn't talk to the applicant. I did email him today. I tried to call him, left a message. I wanted him to be aware. He may be hearing this right now. So instead of the 126,000, if that was to be applied, you're looking at $286,363 to be put into reserves for the purpose of fire protection and budgeted through council as you deem necessary. And of course, we've talked about the extra equipment, which is $23,000, which doesn't change whatsoever. There's been a little bit of stuff here around density bonusing versus amenity contribution. Our bylaw says density bonusing, but this is not a density bonus in this normal sense, because there is no increase in density here. I would actually probably like to refer this as an amenity contribution for fire. Just a nuance there. The rationale for the height variance has been provided and includes that it will lead to less site disturbance, better view corridors through the site, and increased public space for commercial purposes, and the residents for that matter, the strata owners. The rationale for the decrease in the front yard setback for the off-street loading space has been provided and includes site constraints and feasibility of use for the commercial space to be at grade level. Surrounding property owner letters within 50 meters of the proposal have been sent, and council has been provided with the correspondence from the public. We did include one correspondence as part of the package because we did receive it before the report was published. Staff has provided one thing here, so we did want to provide an option based on the $50 change for council. I'm going to defer, I did put up an option C here, but I'm going to defer to corporate services as they've drafted something for council to entertain if you so wish. But we have provided 3 options for council consideration. The third option is provided as a template for council consideration to direct staff to investigate and provide information back to council, potentially. Not sure what Raina may have. Regarding the intent of the fees increase as it relates to the amenity charge or the density bonusing. This would be brought back for council discussion and consideration regarding how this fee should be levied, which would be at your full discretion. I'd like to thank Jamie again. He threw together a really quick, pretty busy today, so this was helpful, and threw this over, and it's a 2% increase. So because the way the bylaw reads, you do 2% at $22, you're at, like, say 23 something, and then we round it to the next 10, which is quite a substantial jump. So this clearly shows what a more modest increase of 2%, where it's 22.44, 22.89, 23.35, and then obviously JB put the corresponding amount that would mean for the developer. This is 2% increase per year without rounding to the next highest $10, as we currently do. The fire chief has noted that a more modest increase may be in line with the original intent of the density bonusing provision and would provide the intended funds as envisioned. That would have been provided based on some sort of budget, and perhaps 2% would cover off the increase over time. But that would be a substantial difference from what was probably budgeted for the fire department. Staff has provided a template, option C. Again, I'll defer to corporate services. If council were to exercise option C, staff would bring back an assessment report and options for council discussion, consideration, and decision as to whether or not how you would like to see rate increases or how you'd like to see that fee levied for this project. And potentially others in the future for any building over 3 stories. One other thing I'd like to note is that we do have zones that support 6 stories, like Main Street. And so we do have some regulations around 6-story buildings in certain areas. So this wouldn't be, although the location is in a different area and not on Main Street, we do have some provisions for these types of buildings in the community. And at the last meeting, the fire chief had noted that our volunteer fire department is fully trained to fight a fire in one of these structures. The CAO's comments. I wish to point out the following. The applicant is in compliance with the zone designation of the property. Staff are suggesting that the majority of criteria for the approval of a development permit have been met. So council has an option to approve the DP. However, other options are provided as well. It is important for council to consider if this application can meet its vision for the community and that specific area. Staff have provided their interpretation of adherence to council's vision, but council has the advantage and benefit to provide final clarity on vision alignment for this application at the council meeting. The applicant has also requested a variance to increase the height of the building. There is a reason why the maximum height was established at 4 stories and not higher. The question is, can the building be viable with 4 stories as it could be with 6. Staff provides arguments that the variance would be beneficial in a number of ways, including environmental reasons. The Director of Planning at the last meeting suggested that the variance is worth consideration of council. I am still of mixed thoughts on this. Maybe further discussion at the meeting will allow me to better understand the implications of the variance. Your Worship, option A is that the development permit be approved for the subject property as well as the height variance from 16.5 meters to 19.2 meters and the front yard setback for an off-street loading from 6 meters to 0 meters. Option B, alternatively, is that all of those be denied. And the reason for that, I did put in that report, but I've restructured the presentation due to some things today, is mainly because the variances are significant enough that this is a full redesign of the project. It would require another DP. And I defer to corporate services.
Actually, the director has some comments.
Yeah, and Your Worship, not to interrupt, but thought it might be opportune to just add to the CAO comments as was mentioned.
Introduce yourself so everybody on stream will know who's speaking.
Absolutely, you probably don't recognize me with the mask on. I'm Jamie McEwen. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the district. I am just wanting to provide some additional comments with respect to the CAO comments. The CAO and I have been speaking about this file, and obviously been working with our planning colleagues throughout the day, just in making some final clarifications. With respect to this application, from a technical standpoint, staff are satisfied with the proposal. Now, that being said, these variances are before council, and really for council's consideration with respect to the aesthetics and with respect to council's level of comfort in terms of the character of the development in relation to the community. The density of the site, as mentioned, isn't changing versus what is proposed in the plan. It's more about the configuration of the density. And maybe just to clarify, because there's been some confusion over the course of the day with respect to the application of the fees bylaw for the amenity charge for fire protection. I did speak with our fire chief today, and also I do know that our corporate services manager has prepared an option for council's consideration in dealing with formalizing how we treat that fee. But a more reasonable approach, and I think what was truly intended in the fee bylaw creation, was that it would be a 2% annual charge rounded to the nearest dollar. More like what we've done with business licensing fees, for example. And that has seen the proposed amount be $24 per square meter, not 50. So the charge is not an exorbitant increase for council's consideration. And in convening discussions today with our fire chief, just to make sure that we were 100% clear, we are comfortable that $24 per square meter will give us what we need to fund the required protection services. So we are quite comfortable on that, and I'll leave it to our corporate services manager to prepare that addition to the resolution, which would be like an addition to option A if council were to grant these variances. And with respect to the variances overall, as mentioned, it's in council's court. The developer does have a presentation to provide. I'd maybe ask council that during that presentation, write down any questions, comments for the developer. And once the developer has finished that, we definitely do have to hear from the public as well. But just want to provide that commentary. And then just with respect to why this is somewhat supportable from a staff perspective, the reduced site coverage has potential environmental benefits in terms of heat island effect, preservation of natural areas, and less disturbance to the site overall. Additional potential benefits with respect to drainage and stormwater management. So the reduced site coverage and increased height, maintaining the same density, does have that potential benefit. Going up also provides the potential benefit for greater commercial opportunities in the development. And so those are some of the considerations that staff have looked at in its consideration. But that being said, council gets consideration for variances with every application. So with that, I'll turn it over to our corporate services manager and then the developer.
Thank you. And corporate service, Raina?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for that, Jamie. So I do have a couple of recommendations here for council. And as staff, we did investigate where this $10, rounded up to the nearest $10 came from, and we discovered an anomaly when this bylaw was adopted in 2016. At first, second, and third reading, Schedule 4 does indicate that it was intended to be a 2% increase rounded to the nearest dollar. And for some error oversight, it did turn into $10 in the adopted bylaw. So in looking at that schedule, the $10 rounded to the nearest $10, as most of those planning fees are over $1,000, the increase is negligible. It is say a $10 increase. On this density bonusing, because it is $22, it is a significant increase. So as I said, looks like it was originally intended to be rounded to the nearest dollar. So a proposed resolution to add on to one of the options available for council is that the density bonusing fee be $24 per square meter, which incorporates the 2% increase since 2016. And that staff be directed to provide an amendment to the fees bylaw and bring that back to council. So we could just add those on to council's desired option. And further to that, I have Mr. Michael Patterson on the phone, and I can transfer him to these speakers. I also have Amir, Rice, Emilio, and Don Erdley all available in the meeting. So I will transfer, if council's ready for the presentation, we'll transfer them.
If we'll hear from the applicant then?
I will transfer
Or
them.
agent for the applicant?
All right, this is Amir Huck speaking. Can you all hear me and see my screen?
We can hear you, yes. Can see you.
Is the presentation showing up on screen?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, council members, for allowing us to present again. I'm here with, I'm representing Dominion Inc., the development corporation, as well as, and we have Reese Leach from Integra Architects, as well as Michael Patterson from P&A Landscape, and we'll be taking you through the overall presentation in support of the DP, as well as additional work that we've done around the variance support. This really comes in three parts. We have one slide on some of our past experience and the introductions. We'll then be going through the overall form and character and landscaping, just our own commentary on that with respect to the development permit and the overall community impact. And then we'll get into the variances. And we've done significant additional work since the last meeting, both in terms of talking to members of the community and addressing specific points raised during the previous council meeting. Significant hours, a lot of photos, a lot of rendering. So hopefully we will address any of the ambiguity that may have existed around what we're intending here and what the impact will be. So first, just introductions of past experience. So we have significant experience in multifamily and commercial and mixed use, and between Integra and P&A, Reese and Mike, they bring over a dozen projects in the Okanagan specifically, as well as hundreds of other projects. And I think they've collaborated on 30 projects together. So it's a tight team with deep knowledge and experience. And I'll just say, representing Dominion as the developer, and this hopefully Don or Mark can substantiate this. Our philosophy as developers is not to try and profit optimize on specific projects. So our intention is to try to do the best project for the specific site, and working with all of the constraints and with how the site was configured, how the density worked. That's why we're proposing the variances that we've set up. But I will stop talking here and hand over to Reese, who will be guiding through most of the presentation here. So Reese, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Amir, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Excellent, great, thank you very much. Okay, so thanks for the intro, Amir, and I'd like to just kick us off. I'm sure everyone's aware, but just so we're all clear where exactly the site is. Obviously, we're in the Lakestone development, and the multifamily site is located in the center of the Benchlands development. So that's obviously the center of that image just there. Got obviously the waterside further down to the lake and the Highlands area up top. So this context plan just a little bit closer in, showing us the site just off Benchland Drive. A little bit down the hill from Tyndall Road, just as Paul noted, and centrally located for really all the development areas in the region. So, next slide, thanks. Okay, so project vision. I'll just run you through some of the lofty ideals that we've been aiming for in this project, and I think one of the key ones is definitely to be a playful and impressive and bold, but not overbearing. One of the other ones is connecting the building into the surrounding neighborhood, and I think that's a theme that's running through the project, and I hope you'll come to understand that as well. Sustainability, and it's an intuitive part of the neighborhood experience. So how we relate to the site itself, to the neighborhood, but also to the environment, and hopefully it's a sophisticated and mature but friendly design and development. The core amenities and features of the project, I won't run through all these in detail, but we have some great amenities. Obviously, we want to make it a desirable building to live in for the residents, but also a desirable building for the neighborhood and for the neighbors around. So that's another key important part of our project. Residential features, we have obviously very spacious balconies because Lake Country has such beautiful climate, great open floor plans, and obviously beautifully appointed residential suites. So we also have commercial features. We have a significant portion of commercial that we'll address in a minute, but we're looking for local business owners. We're looking for commercial enterprises that will be successful and you're really appropriate for the location. Thanks, Nina. Okay, so we'll dive into the context plan here, and I know you've seen this image a few times, so I really want to draw your attention to a few key things. So we've got the stats there on the right-hand side, the split of 1-bedroom den, 2-bedroom den, 3-bedroom den. There, it's really important to note that we're providing a good range of bedrooms there. And the commercial space. Again, we've talked about this, and we'll keep talking about it for most of the night there. But the commercial units are all located in the left-hand building there that Amir is highlighting with the mouse cursor. So currently we're showing 4 commercial units, but it could be 4 to 6 depending on the needs of the enterprise that takes the space. But it is approximately 6,000 square feet. We've also got a significant amount of public outdoor amenity, and I think this is really core value for this whole project. And that's all orientated kind of to the north of the commercial spaces. That all spills out and connects into the park, the public park right now. So I think that's a really important part of this project, is really the community benefit that we're trying to provide in this project, and I'll address it later in the variances as well. Other things I want to point out while we're here, so we've obviously got parkade access to the south of the site, to kind of tucking it in underneath the building as quickly as possible, so that it's really not intrusive. We've also got 2 lobbies, and these lobbies are really kind of sort of symbiotic. They speak to each other, and they also speak to the street, so they have a good street presence. And then down between basically the lobby and the entry ramp for the parkade, we have ground-orientated units. They all have generous patios that face east and have direct access to the street. And then on the flip side, the west side of the building, we have all ground-orientated with units with patios facing to the west there, so the residential amenity. So the residential amenity is all kind of congregated around that central kind of courtyard space between the 2 buildings. You can see there we've got the pool, a number of different amenity, like small gathering spaces that Michael, I'm sure, will go into detail about. But these are really all beautifully pointed spaces, and we think that they really represent what we feel Lakestone lifestyle is about. Just also worth mentioning here, we actually do have a good portion of outdoor amenity for one of those CI units, and that is facing the west. And basically looking through that nice heavily treed, no disturb zone to the west of our site, and then hopefully with some nice views to the lake. Just jump to the next one, thanks, Samir. Okay, so here's one of the first perspectives of the building. I'm going to be seeing this this image a lot, so I'll just kind of talk you through what you're looking at here. And that main building there is the kind of the commercial space at the bottom of that building that creates a long lineal base, and then it really opens out to that beautiful and big public outdoor amenity space, and that connects into the park. We've then got 5 floors of residential stacked on top of that. I think the key point of this image is really what really drove the project design in the beginning was actually the use of the heavy timber and expressive architectural experience, bringing in the warm wood materials that you can see there, and then the juxtaposition of that against the natural stone, the glass and the metal, and really tying in materials here that are really important to the Lakestone Master Plan and are outlined in those guidelines there. We'll just keep going through these images. Here's the next perspective. So that is from the Benchland Drive, looking at the 2 lobbies and their kind of symbiotic relationship with each other. You can also see something a little bit creative, and definitely something you don't see on many projects, as particularly a 6-story, and that's a beautiful sky bridge. So there is a connection, and it is a public space that's residential public space that is connecting those 2 buildings and provides a viewing deck to ensure that residents in the building who may not have lake views from their apartment can get access to those beautiful views. The third perspective here is looking from the west of the building, just sitting over the top of the private kind of residential amenity space. You can see in the bottom left of the image there, that's the commercial retail space spilling out to their own outdoor area that does have some lake views that I talked about earlier. And then we have some horizontal landscaped trellis elements that really kind of tie in all of these outdoor spaces. Obviously, we know the climate's important to have some shade in Lake Country during the summer. So we want to make sure that there's good use of these spaces throughout all times of the year. Okay, so at this point, we're going to, almost jumped to the fly through. We're just looking at the 4th perspective here. So that is from the southeast corner of the site. That's looking at the portion of the project that actually steps back from the property line, both the south property line and the east property line. It's also reduced in height. So it's important to note, and I'm going to touch on this a couple times tonight, this part of the project is actually stepped down to 5 stories. And that 5 stories is actually the 16.5 meter height limit. So we're actually fitting the 5 stories within the allowable height limit at this end of the building. So Amir's just going to kind of play a little fly through here. We do find a little bit of challenge to play the fly through screen share. So Amir's going to kind of scrub us through here. But again, this is the main corner of the building at the northeast corner of the site. As you come through the amenity space, we've just kind of decked out what one of the commercial spaces could be, a bit of a cafe, a bit of a kind of an Italian style providor. And then coming back out of those commercial outdoor space, looking back at the building here, we've broken down the end of that building with a nice strong vertical stone element and window wall, and allowing the balconies to kind of fan away from that. And they are actually tapered from kind of bottom to top. As we come through here, that central breezeway, one of the key reasons we broke up the building was to allow this visual permeability through the site. So allowing residents and some of the neighbors obviously to be able to see through the site. As we come past some of the indoor amenity space here, you can see they kind of spill out onto the outdoor residential amenity. And there's kind of one of the fire pits that Mike's designed, and he'll talk about that kind of space later. As we spin around, we're looking back at the building, again, looking at the commercial space to the left with the 5 stories of residential on top of that in that building, and then the 6 stories on the right. As we wrap around the south end of the building here, you can see that's the 5-story volume and that 2-story stone base that really helps bring the scale of the building down. And it is also important to note that's where we stepped the building, really an additional 10-foot setback from the south property line to reduce any impact to adjacent neighbors. And as we come back down the main street facade here, you know, we've been able to shorten the length of the building here by going a little taller. And in doing so, we've also able to create a kind of a vertical spine that allows those balconies to really span out from that. Overall, I mean, I'm biased, but I think it's a pretty good looking building. As we skip through to the next couple slides, I'm going to hand it over to Michael, so he's going to touch on the landscape design of the project. Michael's in by phone, so I'm hoping someone can patch him.
Sorry. So can you hear my voice now?
Really loud.
Really loud?
Yes.
All right.
Sounds like you're calling from
How
Mars.
is that for sound? Is that better? So I will talk to the plan. I've noticed that I do have a bit of a delay as I watch on the screen from what I'm hearing Reese say to what I'm actually seeing on the screen. So I just want to mention that. But so I'm the landscape architect on the project, and it's just a pleasure to work on this project. It's a really incredible site, and I think it's just a wonderful building and a really great opportunity to connect, to make connections between the building and the landscape. So I'll start along the Benchland Drive. As Reese mentioned, we have ground-oriented patios, and we've allowed those to be pretty generous-sized patios, and there's also a good landscape buffer, soft landscape buffer, to transition between the patios and the streetscape. And the building on the right is just slightly above the grade, and so you'll see at the entry to the building there's a very short 5% pedestrian ramp up to the main lobby. And really we've taken pains to make that lobby entry a real feature of the site. There's a wonderful opportunity, even for people just walking along the sidewalk, to pause and look between the building and, you know, the frame view of the trees and the lake that you get between the building is really quite a great opportunity, a great feature of this project. We have the lobby that is on the north side of the project, or the commercial building, which is set a little bit lower and nestled into the grade just slightly there, but we have barrier-free access, and by the time you're at the commercial side of the building, we have again a slight 5% ramp down into the site. We've provided ample bike parking at just off the sidewalk on the property, and we've got this, as Reese mentioned, this great opportunity for an enlarged commercial space that then opens out onto a really generous patio. And with the connection to the park, we think that there's great opportunities for making a really strong pedestrian link for the community to be able to walk through the park and then to be able to come up into the commercial area and enjoy the amenities that provides. And so we have the three smaller retail units, and then of course we have overlooking the lake, we have a larger CRU and really generous patio that actually operates at two different levels to provide seating to enjoy the landscape. We have a number of amenities provided in the courtyard for the residents of the building, including the pool and the hot tub. We really made the sort of a dramatic statement with the location of the hot tub, and really trying to draw your eye out into the landscape. We've used those darker linear elements as forms that really work to connect the building into the landscape. To the right, we have also provided seating nodes, so opportunities for residents to engage in separate, smaller social gatherings. And again, the ground floor units have patios that are set slightly above the grade, so a little bit of separation and from the walkway. As we go towards the south, we have, we've lowered the grade of those seating nodes so that they sit a little bit more closely to the landscape. We're really wanting to transition the landscape up onto the podium from the natural grade to help soften that transition to the building. And we've provided good areas of soft landscape to help to screen and buffer the building. You'll notice that there's a large area on the west side of the project, which is a lighter green, and that is the undisturbed area, and that's about represents about 23% of the site. And those trees are trees that are on the site that we are retaining. So Reese, maybe go to the next slide. And again, I apologize because I have a bit of a delay here, so I'm still looking at the site plan. I believe my delay is about 10 or 15 seconds here. Reese, can you tell me what slide that you're looking at now?
We were on the landscape character slide now.
Okay, so when we started out on the project, we really, again, as informed by the site, we started to look for images to really give us a sense of how the character of the sites and the project was going to evolve. And one of the really key images that we focused on was the one at the top left here, where you can see that cantilever deck with the lounge chairs overlooking the lake and the pool with an infinity edge. So that was a strong component of our objective for the site, was to really develop this building so that it really feels like it's knitted into the landscape, which I think is really nicely achieved in that slide. And then the other images, as you go to the right, give you a character of some of the materiality that we're looking at, using natural elements of stone. With the pool, we have an opportunity for also having some a water feature that would be integrated in as a recirculating element as part of the pool. We were looking to, I mentioned those linear elements that really connected the building to the landscape, and that lower second image down on the left. We were looking to add these linear elements, whether they be of stone, which you can see that sort of stone material coming through on the second row of images, to really ground the building, and the landscape in the natural setting. And then, of course, some of the amenities, beginning then to look at, how the fireplace and the materiality around the pool, things like the shading of the trellis, how that could be developed. And then on the bottom row, some of the site furnishings that we're using that are a little bit more natural and soft in their appearance, again, more suited to kind of a gentler landscape. Let's move to the next slide, which I believe begins to look at the trees on the site. So on the site currently, there are a total of 70 trees. And we were proposing to remove 9, and we're retaining 61 of the trees. And we will then be, so on this slide that we're looking at, these are the trees that we're retaining, and the light green represents the canopy of those trees. And so those are the 61 trees that are being retained. And then on the left side of the image, you'll see a number of trees that are just been outlined. Those are the 9 existing trees that are being removed, and they are on the developable part of the site. And then the next slide shows the 43 new trees that we're proposing to the project to begin to build back and the landscape and begin to sort of surround the building with trees. Next slide, please. I'm
on the planting schematic now.
Sorry, you're on the which schematic?
I'm on the planting schematic.
The planting schematic. So the images of the planting?
Correct.
Okay. So we really, as I said, we've worked really quite hard to ground this building in the language of this country, and so we have planted a number of plant materials of both trees. Now we're replanting with mostly deciduous trees, and that's because we're following the Fire Smart guidelines for the development of the site. But you can see, and this plan shows the areas of soft landscape planting. So you'll notice on the right-hand side that we have a fairly good area of planting to help buffer that transition to the development to the east. And then these are the images of some of the plants that we're looking at. And so we're looking at trembling aspens and amelanchiers and ponderosa pines are the natural, the trees surrounding the site. And then we have mountain ash. And then some of the shrubs that we'll be using are the native shrubs of dogwoods and linebark and snowberry and Oregon grape. And then at the ground plane level, what we wanted to do, the lower images there, maybe the third row down, we're looking at introducing plants that provide color, whether it's the lavender or the rudbeckia, the black-eyed Susans, or the stonecrop sedums, and then introducing as well some grasses. So we are looking at introducing the grasses and interspersing that with perennials, again, to kind of pick up on the grassland that exists there now, but provide some interest and some color through the year. So I believe that is the end of the landscape presentation, and I know you have a larger package in your booklets that you've been provided. So I'm here to answer questions if you have any landscape questions later on. Thank you very much for your time.
Councillor McKenzie had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks for that presentation. I do have a question as far as the variance to the front.
We have a full section on the variances that we can still go through. So there'll be
because I didn't see any reason for it in the pictures, and I'd like explanation on that one. So I'll wait for that. But I also did have one question for Michael, being the landscape guy. We're being trying to put a push on some rainwater recycling, and in a project like this, you know, when you're doing all the landscape planning, is there any way that you can water this with recycled water in a project like this?
There certainly are ways that you can water with recycled water. It is challenging because, of course, you have to build a container to hold the water, and your summertime is a fairly dry period. So it really just becomes a matter of how big that container needs to be.
Okay, I just, you know, that's a big surface on top of that building and would capture a lot of water, and it's just it'd be a shame to see it wasted. But obviously we're just dealing with the variance for this, but seeing that you were talking landscaping, I thought I would ask the question.
Sure.
Councillor Scarrow.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for being here and your presentation. You're part of the presentation. The only question I have for you is you talked about removing, I believe it was 9 trees and replacing them with 43 other trees. My question,
43,
yeah, my question is, what are those replacement trees look like in the way of maturity? Are they saplings? Are they a variety of matureness? Or do you just put in 5-pound pots?
Yeah, we provided a variety of trees. As I mentioned, due to the Fire Smart guidelines, we weren't able to replant conifers within a certain area of the site. So the trees that we're proposing to plant on site would be deciduous trees. And there, as I mentioned, there are trees such as the trembling aspen, which is a deciduous tree and probably gets to about 30-35 feet in height. We've got a flowering amelanchier, which is probably around the 25-foot height. And then we have the Western Mountain Ash as well as the Douglas Maple. So trying to stay native to the area with our selection of tree material and trying to provide a bit of a variety as well.
I appreciate the variety and I appreciate the reasons for the deciduous. My question was, when you put them in the ground after the construction of this is done, at what level of maturity will these trees be?
Oh, I see. I didn't catch that. Sorry. Typically, on the plans, we've specified the plant material as 6 centimeter caliper, which is fairly standard for a development project like this. So that's about a 2.5 inch diameter trunk. So they would be going in obviously as small trees, and then they would go up to their mature size over time.
Thank you for your answer, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I have the planning. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to clarify that the district does hold a landscape bond, and on something as large as this, we will be monitoring this over a 2-year period. It will require monitoring to make sure the landscape takes, and we will be out there to review that and make sure that there isn't anything that needs to be replaced, so we are getting what they're proposing. And on this, off the top of my head, the landscape deposit is quite significant. I believe it's around $140,000. So it's no drop in the bucket for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Reid, comment or question?
It's a question. Just before we get into the depth, it's not to do with landscaping, it's to do with the previous presentation and the style of the building, but I'm just looking at the east and west elevation drawings that have been provided as part of our package. And when Paul opened the presentation, he put the height of the building was noted as 19.2 to the corner of the roof. Now, on top of the roof, there are various upward protrusions, which are higher than that, but also on the plan itself, there are some numbers which indicate the heights of each story. And if you add them together, they get 19.52. And we've double checked it. So could we just get a look at that and see exactly what, maybe the plans have changed, what's in the package has now been amended, but I just need some clarification on that.
So I believe on one of those elevation drawings, it is 19.52, but that's below average grade. So the height measurement is from average grade. So we had this discussion with the architect, and our bylaw does note average grade. So even though there may be some additional height there, our bylaw actually measures height from average grade of the site to the top of the building. And to your other question, typically we don't include things like elevator or stairwells or anything like that in the total height of buildings. Typically, they're not included.
Okay, so sorry,
Reese, would you be able to?
My question is that it's to the road line, so this is going from the road. So when we say to the average grade, what do we mean by that? Do we mean that it's sloping away and therefore we take the lowest point and then the highest point and average it out?
Absolutely. Typically what average grade is, and may actually be one of the best people to answer this question, but typically you would take different points of a site, whether it be the four corners, and then whatever those heights are, then average it out on a site. So.
But when we're looking at it from the road, it would be fair to say that the height of the building to the average pedestrian looking from the road is going to be 19.2 because that's the height that they're looking at it from.
I understand what you're saying. To an average person standing on the street, they'll probably see 19.52, but that is not in line with how we define height in our zoning bylaw. And so we did a back and forth on this, and we're absolute that is average grade as defined in our zoning bylaw. So it might be slightly out, absolutely. And to your point, maybe someone on the street, but as our bylaw is defined, it does meet our bylaw.
But what they're building is 19.52. the building size is 19.52.
I would say absolutely, but that would not be in line with our definitions for height. So if you're saying what's actually going to be exposed is 19.52, absolutely, you're correct there.
Okay.
How we define that and the way we do variances means that this is absolutely what council would need to approve. But I see where you're going with that. Yes, you would see 19.54.
Thank you, I appreciate the clarification. Thanks.
You want to add to that, Jamie?
Yes, actually, I had a couple of other issues that I wanted to ask about, if that's possible.
Have Jamie at the microphone. Let him talk, and then I'll get to you. You're next.
Thank you for your patience. I just wanted to clarify that council will grant the variance by resolution, and whatever the resolution is what will get delivered as well. But our senior planner, Paul Dupuis, did a good job of explaining how that's defined in practice. So I'm redundant now. Thank you.
Oh, and we do have another, like the bulk of this presentation that we've prepared is on the variances, which we have not yet presented.
Okay, and now Councillor Gamble.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not sure who should answer this, but Paul had talked about the reduced site coverage with the 6 stories, and that there would be environmental, fair amount of land protected, environmental preservation. And just looking at the site and what I've seen so far, I can't see the preservation there, and maybe that could be pointed out. Obviously, there is the no-build zone, which is the natural preservation area. There's a no-build zone, but from the changed from 4 to 6, the reduced site coverage. It seems to me, when I look at all the pictures, it looks like it's pretty much covered with tarmac or concrete, pathways, walkways, and so on around the building. So I wonder, how is that environmental preservation? That was one, and I have one other, and that is regarding the setback. There's a request for a 0 setback for a loading zone. I didn't see that explained, at least I couldn't hear it very well, and I wonder if that could be gone over.
Councillors, the entire variances section in our presentation has not yet been presented, so if you'd like us to present that, we can, and it'll probably answer a lot of these questions.
Okay, that's fine then.
Your worship, do you want me to address those questions?
No.
Or we'll move forward?
We'll get to
Paul. Okay. I think as the applicant said, they have a whole presentation of the variance. I probably should hear from them first, and then delve into the variance questions.
Okay, carry on with the presentations then.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mayor. Okay, so I know this is the main part of the show, the main act, the bylaw variance considerations. So, I think we maybe take a step back and say, why would we want a variance from 16.5 to 19.2? And I think first and foremost, it came from good design. It was really, the intent was to provide a site-specific design approach that was suitable, that created additional benefit for the community, and that had a better environmental impact on the site and on the neighborhood. And I'm going to touch on those things, but it was really to create a landmark, right? A building that was a hub for Lakestone with important defining visual impact and responsibility. So the view impact, again, we've talked about this, and we're going to continue to talk about it. You're balancing the impact or lack of impact on neighbors with the community benefit of the view through the site. And then the third portion was the public amenity. So ensuring that there was ample outdoor public space that will allow this vibrant community to grow and allow the existing neighbors and the residents of the new proposed project to benefit from that pocket park and from some of the stunning views from the area. So the project statistics, again, we'll just a quick run through this. Obviously, the master plan, there's a 6-floor proposal, and then there's what would potentially be a 4-floor proposal. So you can see that the real benefit of the 6-story is a significant amount of commercial, a significantly reduced building footprint and building frontage. I don't know if anyone has ever stood in front of a 230-foot long building faced with no breaks and no relief. It's not particularly pleasant. And a significant public outdoor amenity. Obviously 7,800 square feet versus 1,500 square feet. I mean, that's huge. We're talking, fivefold. Obviously the reduced lot coverage, and again, we'll touch on this in a minute because one of the councils already brought that up. What does that mean? What does a reduced lot coverage give us? Well, it actually gives us a significant increase in soft landscaped area as well as hard landscaped area. So yes, we have definitely hard landscaped areas, and there's areas that like Michael described, paved areas with with paving stones, soft landscape, hard landscape. It's a variety of materials that are appropriate for their use. So definitely isn't asphalt, and definitely isn't just a big old plain concrete, that's for sure. Because we, as planning staff mentioned, we want to reduce the heat island effect of such a large development. So we want to make sure that we actually offset that with significant soft landscaping. Parking stalls, obviously, that's in the numbers have already been kind of mentioned. So here's the massing. Sorry, maybe go that one. Yeah, here's the project massing. So that's the 4-story footprint in purple and the 6-story footprint in grey. So the 6-story is actually, you can see there's a setback volume to the left there. That's actually the 5-story portion that's within the height limit. And you can see that again in the elevation diagram at the bottom of the page there. That's showing our proposed 6-story and the way we're approaching the building. So it was to break up the building mass. It was to provide relief of the building. It was to provide, significant community in benefit to the site. Go to the next one, thanks again. So here's a quick snapshot of, again, the volume of what we're talking about. So if we had a 4-story building, it would require a firewall because the building is actually too large in footprint for the BC Building Code. We would lose the opportunity for that visual permeability. So we've highlighted the areas of the 4-story building that we've actually chopped off and chopped out, and then we've moved up onto basically that effectively one vertical story of height variance. So it's only just under 3 meters. So you can see there in the lower portion of the image that public plaza, that direct connection that we've talked about. The breaking up of the building masses, the lobbies that communicate to each other, and the sky bridge that really jumps across the two buildings. We've reduced the volume on the south. We're setting that back from the building facade. We're setting that down from the building height. So that there's some significant moves here that I think have a huge impact on the development and hugely beneficial. So here's a screenshot from a fly-through that we're about to play. So we've actually modeled out with massed 4-story option on the left and the proposed 6-story option at the right. And you can actually see physically as you fly around. This drone footage was actually taken from September 2019. So it was a drone footage that was given to us by McDonald's Development. So we were able to input the 3D models into this, scale them appropriately so you can see the impact of the two different buildings. You can see how much larger of a footprint that 4-story option has. So you can see that, really the benefits here are overwhelming to the neighborhood and to the adjacent neighbors, and that's something we're going to touch on in a minute. I think we'll jump to the next one there, Amir. So just as we come back and pause on that, I really want to point out, so we have obviously our neighbors to the south, and we've done some significant view studies and impact studies that I'm going to address in the next couple of slides here. But I really want you to take that in, this image in. I want you to see the north end of the site. I want you to see that community outdoor area that's adjacent to the commercial space, the significant volume of that and the connection to the park. I want you to see on the 4-story where you don't have that. The only outdoor space you would have on the 4-story option is just directly to the street of only about 1,200 square feet of outdoor area and only 600 square feet of commercial space. There is no visual permeability of the site. The footprint of the building is much larger, much closer to, it basically is pushed all the way to the full setbacks of the site. It is really, I don't think anyone could stand here and say to me that 4-story is a better solution, for the site, for the community. Thanks, Ian. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we're going to touch on the view impacts. So what we've done is we've studied 3 lots, and these lots had come up in the previous public hearing that we'd spoken to, and the concerns were raised by these residents, and we thought that it would be important to study the lots that they live on, and they actually turned out to be a great cross section of the lots that would be impacted from this development. So what we've done here is we've communicated with these residents and tried to work with them to understand their concerns and then show them how we've addressed it and what the impact would be should we be going ahead with a 6-story versus a 4-story. So here you can see on the left, you've got a sort of that sectional diagram there showing the 4-story building hard to the setback. There's the 6-story volume is actually dashed in red. So you actually see on the southern property line, this is for the Benchlands Lot 38 impact, and the southern property line, the 5 stories where we've dropped it down to 5 at this corner is setback, and it's actually the same height. So that is the same height as a 4-story version. So at the south property line, the building is the same height as what would be allowed under a 4-story version. That's 16.5 meters. That 3D image on the right-hand side of the page there is just showing you the volume and giving you an understanding of the mass of that, how that would impact that neighbor being so close to their property line, right hard up against the setback. Now, one thing else I want to point out here is a 4-story version would actually, just as a rough outline of how those units would be laid out in the building, you'd actually have 2 units paired facing the south. So for a 4-story option across 4 floors, we'd actually have 8 units looking over any of our neighbors to the south. So when we talk about overlook concerns, with both those units and that building, that 4-story building is pushed to the hard to the setbacks, and it actually creates an increase in overlook concern compared to the 6-story version. So the 6-story version obviously is 5 at this end of the building. It only has 5 units, 1 unit per floor facing the south elevation. And it's obviously also facing more to the center of the adjacent neighborhood, so the adjacent house to the south. So it's actually not necessarily looking at their backyard, it's looking more into the center of the home. So I think those are really key points to bring up for this slide. For the next one, we've got the Lot 1 Highlands lot. So this lot, again, here we've worked with the developer and the owner of this lot to understand his concerns and to understand the impact of a 6-story versus a 4-story across these 3 views from his site. So we took 3 views because we were interested to see, sort of the bottom of his lot where maybe nothing would be built, but somebody might walk down to the bottom of his lot at some point during his ownership, one at the top of the lot, and then one where we felt that it would be maybe the most ideal location for some outdoor entertaining area, as a proposed house design in that spot. So I think the next slide we're going to really zoom in on the view 3, but before we do that, oh sorry mate. Before we do that, sorry, I tricked you on that one. Before we do that, I want you to really take in, so 6-story versions are on the top here and the 4-story versions are on the bottom. So those 3 views, we've placed that model inside those real photos, and you can see that in all options, we actually can still see the lake over the top of the building, and we can still see the bridge in the distance. And I think that's even more so apparent in the next slide. So this is a zoomed in version of that 3rd image. So where we think that the resident would most likely have some outdoor entertaining area. So on the left, you can see the 4-story option, and on the right, you can see the 6-story option. And as is evident through all our other elevations and diagrams, we're actually only, the 6-story versus 4-story is only 3 meters or just under 2.7 higher than the 4-story. So the building mass is larger. It's only slightly higher for a 6-story. The building mass is smaller, and you still have plenty of lake views from this lot. Next slide. All right, so this is lot 36. So just a little bit to the north of the site. And I think it's important to note here what we've done is actually taken a photo across the adjacent lots 37 and 38. somebody, you might say that maybe this isn't necessarily their view, and it isn't really. Their view is more, towards the lake, and would typically be looking down their lot. This is looking across their lot, but we thought it was important to look at the building from all angles. On the bottom of the screen, you're seeing a 6-story proposal, and then on the right-hand side, you're seeing the 4-story proposal, and you can see that really the impact is fairly minimal. At this end of the building, the 6-story does come a little bit further out than the 4-story, but again, the volume on the right-hand side for the 4-story option is a little bit bigger, and you can see obviously it's just kind of poking its head above the trees there. Really a fairly minimal impact, and definitely no view lost for these lots. Okay, so then in response to some of the other concerns and queries from council, we sent out a drone to get some new footage. This drone footage we captured from the lake. This is about 5 meters above the lake level, obviously on the west of the site, looking towards the site. So this is just a photo of the site as is. You might struggle to see where the site is, but it is basically dead center in this image at the top of that escarpment, and it is obviously heavily treed. And so what we've done in the next slide is we've taken, again, the 4-story and the 6-story, and we've placed it into that image just to show you the real life impact of those of this development and of the two proposed kind of volumes. I would challenge you to tell me which is which, actually. And I think it's actually a compelling statement here to say that the left image is actually the 6-story and the right image is actually the 4-story. And you might ask me, well, okay, well, how is that the case? Well, I'll point out to you that on the left image, you can see the 6-story volume on the left side of the building is actually protruding a little bit further forward than the building. And you can see on the right-hand side of that building is where we step down to 5 stories. On the right-hand image, because of the 4-story footprint being larger than the 6-story, the edge or the face of the building is actually closer to the escarpment, and therefore you actually see a little bit more of the building from this perspective. Now, obviously, the only time you're ever going to see this is if you're either had a hang gliding accident or you're lucky enough to get yourself onto a boat and enjoy the lake. And finally, what we wanted to bring to your attention is obviously the loading zone. So the loading zone variance, this is something that we were working with staff back and forth throughout the kind of the whole process. It is a bit of a challenge on this site to provide loading for the commercial and residential uses. Typically, with a commercial property and commercial development, the bylaws would allow for lane access, and obviously on this site we are only able to face Benchland Drive. And so we were challenged a bit, okay, how can we incorporate a loading zone or a loading space that would benefit commercial and residential, not be obtrusive to the neighborhood, and be well located. So what we came up with is, okay, there's a couple of options. One option, put the loading underground. The loading requirements actually is a 4.5 meter height clearance. That would actually increase the height of the building, so we'd have to lift it up to be able to get underneath it. At the moment, as it is, the ramp is kind of ramping down as fast as possible to reduce its impact. So to be able to get underneath the building, we actually have to raise it up a little bit. So we said, okay, a loading underneath the building is probably not the best solution. Have to raise the building. It would also increase the depth of the excavation to the site, so that's obviously another negative for an environmental impact. Option 2, locate it at grade. That's where we've gone. As we talked through with staff, we felt that the best location for this was actually centrally located between commercial and residential. We really were styling this more as a portico shed. So something, again, a little bit of a European influence, something that can be visually appealing, can work in with the materials and the landscaping of the site, and is also a safe solution for the site. There are obviously alternatives of perpendicular loading in and out of the site, but again, that typically is actually spoken negatively in your bylaw about perpendicular loading because of the safety concerns of backing in and backing out of the loading across and into a road. So we've decided to locate it just inside the site here, and we feel like that's the best location and the most suitable location for the project. So this about ends our presentation here, and I just want to say I'm really grateful for your considerations tonight. I look forward to a successful project in the District of Lake Country, and I'm happy to answer any questions as is Amir and Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councillor.
Thank you for your presentation and also the effort that's gone into it. I think we've got a much more complete view than we had 2 weeks ago. And I appreciate, obviously, there was some long night to get that up to this standard in this shorter period of time. I do have a couple of questions. I was looking back through my notes from the open house and the strategy session. Unfortunately, the strategy session isn't available online from last year, but I like taking notes. So we have had a number of letters come in, and there have been 2 letters that are 3 letters of support from people or companies who are in the same sort of field. And I just picked up on a couple of things that they had said. And I know we've talked a lot about climate change or climate impacts on here, but the letters reference the couple of things they say. Projects will provide more families with the opportunity to get their foot in the market and to potentially use it as a stepping stone. And then there was another comment about much needed smaller scale homes for the current and new residents, as well as support community new commercial space. But from the notes from my meeting, the target audience that was presented to us was people with or who had $1 million plus in assets. So those 2 statements, they were made some time ago. So I'm just trying to work out where you guys have settled on, because I think they raised important points in these letters about affordable homes, but that kind of doesn't gem with what was in the presentation a year ago. So I just wonder whether the makeup of the properties have changed or the target audience has changed, and could you speak to that?
Absolutely. So there's definitely a wide range. If you think about the east-facing units, east-facing 1-bedroom units that don't have a lake view, there'll be a massive price difference between those and the 3-bedroom penthouse units with a lake view. So so both are correct. And whenever we're talking about a target audience, we're typically talking about an aspirational audience that represents sort of the median target. But I would say out of the 86 units in the building, probably 30 of them, please don't quote me on that specific number, Councillor Reid, because I know you take great notes, a range somewhere between 15 and 30 of the units would be I would classify as affordable entry-level housing into this area.
What would you class as affordable housing? What number are you thinking of?
Sorry, and we don't yet have the target pricing, but I'd say those would fall below any pricing of the single family homes, like well below any pricing of single family homes within this area.
And I can probably add to that. We have 31 1-bedroom or 1-bedroom and den homes that are anywhere from 600 to 900 square feet. The majority of them, which is 26 units, are under 800.
Under 800,000.
Under 800 square feet.
Okay.
That's 36% of the development. One
right.
is one.
We don't yet have our pricing established for what each unit is going to be, but just in terms of the square footage, you can infer from that compared to the the 2,000 plus square foot single family homes in the area.
Yes, but that would be a 2,000 square foot multiple bedroom family home, and we're comparing it with a 1-bedroom 600 square foot apartment. So they're not quite sharing the same families as occupants. I mean, I agree there'll be a price difference, but it's not quite affordable homes for families at a 1-bedroom plus den at 600 square feet.
Yeah.
But you've helped me understand where we are, and I appreciate that.
Sure.
My other question would be, when we're looking at the property, you'd mentioned that the 5th story at the end is to the height maximum, so 16.5. So given the natural grade thing, it could actually go up to 16.85 if we really wanted to. My question is why not put a proposal into us for something that meets the height requirement but still gives you 5 stories?
Generally across the building, is that the question? Like,
Yeah, because I mean, what you're asking, what I'm hearing you're asking us to do is to step out really outside of the OCP and place a 6-story, 19.2 meter high to grade of average grade building outside of the OCP. So my question would be, why one of the options would be to do a 5-story building that meets the height requirements. So we're really not varying anything substantially in that. So I just wondered what led to the 6-story.
The total developable square footage goes down. Reese, you could tell me the exact percentage, but it makes the building uneconomic. So we can't actually, so in order to be able to reduce the lot coverage, maintain the density, which makes sort of makes the project work from a revenue and expense perspective with our projections. That's the way that's just how the math unfolded.
You would be, if you lopped off a floor, a typical floor is actually 16 units. So you'd be severely reducing the number of units. And I might add just to that, obviously, 16.5 is the height limit as per the bylaw, and it is compliant at that end. I think maybe there's a misunderstanding there that at the north end of the site, the grade is a little bit higher and the building is actually, partially below grade at that portion. So, like any building, we have to juggle the natural grade of the site. The grade of the site does actually fall from the north to the south. And so we've had to adjust it so that the lobbies of both buildings, are at or close to grade. So we're working, we've worked with landscape architects and with civil engineers to basically locate that commercial area. You can see it just there actually in the top left. We actually have a ramp down and some stairs down. We've actually had to depress the building a little bit to make sure the building isn't overly high. So the appearance of the height of the building from that corner of the site would be less than 19.2. So that's what I'm saying. I hope that's clear.
Okay, because I just added up the story size on that 5th floor, and that's 16.8, not 16.5. So I don't know. I'm not understanding the grade one, but I was just thinking in terms of compromising. Yes, you might have to go out a bit more in terms of lot coverage, but you wouldn't be going to the same extent as you would be 4 stories. So I wasn't suggesting completely getting rid of a 6th floor and not replacing it in some way, but compromising in terms of coming into a median point. But my final question would be when you're talking about the 7,800 square foot public amenity, are you including the pocket park in that?
No, that is not on our property, so no, we can't count that.
Raina, did you have somebody online?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I have a George Soar on the line for council.
Okay.
Okay, one moment. I'll transfer him through.
We have a letter from him, I think.
Hello, George. You are speaking to council now. If you'd like to go ahead and state your name for the record.
Yeah, hi there. My name is George Suarez.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, hi there. Just took you off speakerphone. Is this volume okay?
All right, sure. We just need name and address.
Hi there. My name is George Suarez, and I just bought the property yesterday. It is 9708 Frenchland, which is one of the properties.
We have a letter from you, do we?
Yes.
Yeah.
I sent it yesterday. Thank you. So, first off, I'd like to express my gratitude for having the chance to speak and address the audience today. I do wish to express my strong opposition to the variances, the height variance. And I'd like to talk about it, let's say, in 2 specific ways. One, as a property owner who is going to be an immediate neighbor to the north. And then secondly, from a policy point of view. On the first, with a building that is another 10 feet or so taller, and as one of the renderings showed, the people on the top floors of a 6-story building will be looking directly into our backyard. And I take some exception to the comment made earlier that there's hardly a difference, in my opinion. And as an owner of a property, having just purchased something that I wanted to have privacy, I'm not happy with having a building that's going to be 2 stories higher to my left. And that is a direct impact on us. The second angle that I'd like to just mention is this, I'm not sure if the councillors have visited Lake Stone, but just to give you a sense of things, this is really remote. There's no town nearby. This is a beautiful community that's built on the hillside, and it's pristine. There are forests and trails. The whole idea of buying in that area is that you're going to get to enjoy what Mother Nature has to offer all around us. The fact that you're going to build a condo and make it higher is completely against first principles of building, this kind of building in a residential area. It's one thing to have a higher building in the middle of town. I get that. But this is not that. This community is remote, and just imagine whether it's all the homes to the right and left of that condo building, or all the homes that are above it, in other words, behind the condo. Just to have anything higher in front as a neighbor makes no sense whatsoever from a policy point of view. And I don't think it's the role of the council to get involved in optimizing from a commercial point of view a development. There was a bylaw that was put in place that said 4 stories. When we purchased a lot in our building, our home, we don't want a neighbor with a higher building. It just doesn't make any sense, and it takes away from the sense of beauty of the area. Just imagine if you were driving along the west side of Okanagan Lake and you're looking over back on the east. I mean, to have a taller condo just sticking out, I mean, I just think it'll be a sore thumb. And people are going to say, who authorized that? Like, what? How is it that there's a taller building over there? So my letter speaks to other details, and I like to leave a chance to my other neighbors to speak up, but I do urge the council to not get involved in optimizing the commercial profitability of this kind of development at Lake Stone. And I thank you again for your time.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anybody else? Raina? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we did have one other that we were waiting for. They said they would call back, but we have not heard from them at this time. So we do have Michael Patterson back on the line. Should council have any questions for him, I can bring him back into the speaker.
Okay. And any questions for anybody? The issue of pardon? No, the issue of that last caller just purchasing, but he said the difference between multifamily and single family, 4 stories versus 6 stories, but it's been on our master plan for that development that was since some time ago, and so I don't know if the realtors talk about people when they're selling or talk about what may be in the neighborhood, but that's been on. I'll ask the planner. That's been in the plan for some time. Paul?
Your worship, so yes, obviously this multifamily site has been in the Lake Stone master plan, but is envisioned as 4 stories. One of the things is when you create nodal development, such as we've done, i.e. Lake Stone, increased commercial in an area is actually quite sustainable. It means, now I don't know what type of commercial is going to be in there, so you can make the argument, oh, maybe it's coffees or this, but there would be services closer to the people that live in Lake Stone. And I would hope, it's up to the developer, but they might put in like a Whole Foods grocery, something to that effect, so that people don't have to drive all the way into town to get their groceries. So the concept of, and this has been lost through time, corner stores in residential neighborhoods when you were a kid, you used to walk to the store and actually grab some basic things. So as we create density in different areas, do you not need to provide those services? And from a planning perspective, the argument would be you try to provide services to people where they live. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Ahead, Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for those comments, Paul. I happen to wholeheartedly agree with them. As I've argued in all of our development space and all of our time, we have zero services on the west side of the highway. Zero. And, you know, the Lakestone has a massive development up there. There's over 1,300 units in this, and they all have to drive to town for even a coffee. So I support, honestly, I don't think that we're, you know, as the caller intimated that we were trying to help the commercial viability of this project. We're not trying to help that at all. I fully believe that the environmental aspect of this building is in keeping the footprint to the smallest. And I think that the presentation the developers done, I commend them on the presentation. They covered every aspect, and they covered a lot of questions that came up at the last meeting, and very specific individualized information. So I commend them on that. I think that this is, as they propose it, it's an iconic looking building, and it would be a, you know, this would be what was always meant to be there at the very beginning was a resort hotel. And this is not that, but it's an iconic, beautiful building. And substituting it for the 4-story massive thing with no breezeway or no anything, to me, it's just unconscionable. If we're going to have this kind of density there, which I wish we didn't, but if it was up to me, I wish we didn't have all of Lakestone up there either. So, and I would think that, you know, how we talk about these things, most of my neighbors would agree with. But it's there, and this was the plan, to have that kind of density there. So that's a given that it's going to happen. Let's try to make it the most beautiful, nicest thing it can be. And to sacrifice having some commercial space and more public space around that building, whether it's not all accessible by all of the public or not, means it's more livable, means it's a better building, means people can spend more time outside, be healthier. I just don't see I don't see a lose anyway.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Scarrow.
Well, I could just say that same speech again, but I won't. But my one question is, if I could ask maybe Paul, am I right in understanding that because there's no density change, that there will be no public hearing and no other opportunity for the public to speak on this?
So, Your Worship, I can answer that question.
Yeah.
This is not a rezoning application. This is a development permit and a DVP. Tonight is the opportunity for the public to speak to the variance, not to the DP. And this is it.
That's the zone for, okay. Thank you. Councillor Reid? Yeah, okay. The Councillor Gamble? Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to say that when I came to hear this, and when I read this whole application, I must say I was thinking somewhat negatively. And I believe that you have done one of the most professional presentations I've ever seen. I'm pretty impressed, and you answered the questions well. I think you have shown, you know, how the way you've masked the two buildings and provided some creativity to actually, you know, cause that, you know, that breeze through to allow you to see through to the lake even. Those are things that I think really set this apart. And as I say, I was thinking quite negatively about this when I came, but I think that you really are listening to the people around you. Now, loss of privacy is something that is, even with a 4-story building, there is going to be loss of privacy. And in the master plan, the very first master plan, and I was on council then, there was a boutique hotel planned for that site. and the mayor mentioned that. So that this is not departing from that, but I believe that what I've seen tonight is a much more creative, a much more attractive plan than that 4-story. And as I say, I wasn't convinced, but now I think you've kind of turned that corner on me. So good job for you guys, because I wasn't there before.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go back to the public again. Raina, you have somebody on the phone?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to transfer him. We should have a John Tate, if you're there. Can you hear me? You're now speaking to.
Hello?
If you can state your
Hi.
name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name's John Tate, 9702 Benchland Drive, that's lot 36. Thanks for taking my call. I'm definitely, on behalf of my wife and I, want to speak to you in opposition of this height variance. We definitely have sent in some correspondence to you in the past about this. Before the November meeting, we also talked to you in council. My wife and I purchased lot 36 in July of 2019. It's 3 houses from lot 94. This was zoned for, as you know, a 3 to 4 story condo, and the entire development is filled mainly with 2-story flat roofed or angled roofed homes. This 6-story building will not blend in the neighborhood at all. It will be 3 times the height virtually of all the adjacent homes and will dominate the skyline. It would invade the privacy of all the homes nearby in Benchland Drive, but it would also damage severely the views from countless homes and unbuilt homes in Benchland and Highland. And now, because of a variance submitted by this builder, it affects all the details previously provided to homeowners. P&D was clear in 2019 in explaining to us prior to purchase that this could not exceed 4 stories. The realtors and the Del Ponte Realty team, which exclusively sells the homes in Benchland and Highland through the information center and through the show homes, were adamant it would not exceed 4 stories. Those are selling reps for McDonald Properties. Then lot 94 was sold to this builder. They knew full well it was zoned for 4 stories or 16.5 max height meters. Yet there's zero evidence they ever designed a 4-story building. On any building that complied with the 16.5 meter limit in height. Instead, they're attempting to convince council to change their vision and allow an increase to 19.2 meters. Planning and Development stated in its findings they felt it would improve viewscape and green space. And I have a question that says, for whom? Certainly, it would invade the viewscape of all the surrounding homes. It would far exceed tree line. As you know, across from it is the public courts, and behind that is a rock wall that can't be developed. So how does this improve viewscape? Are we saying there will be better views from the road and the playing courts? But what about all the dwellings that will look towards the lake and see this building standing far higher than any other structure anywhere in the neighborhood? And as even exemplified tonight in their presentation, that building is above tree line. So what about the natural hiking trails that will now be looking at this huge building? And what would approving this do except help the developer profit more? How would this benefit the district? It's the same amount of units to be built. It increases the amount of amenity space at ground level for the developer by as much as exemplified tonight, 10 times, which again only adds to higher profits for them. They want to convince you it's green space, but it's not. It's amenity space. It doesn't help the neighborhood. It impedes on the privacy of the homes surrounding it. It increases significantly the amount of retail and hospitality space for them to profit off of. It increases parking issues for the homeowners in the street. They're promising 14 visitor parking stalls in an 80-plus mixed-use facility. These parking spaces will be overflowing from owners and renters with more vehicles than parking spots. There will be retail and hospitality employees using these daily. So therefore, there will be additional parking on the streets, adding to the already significant parking problems that exist due to the pickleball league centered across from lot 94 at the courts. So how many calls in the future is council going to receive about parking problems in this area because of all of this extra retail and hospitality? The 50-meter contact zone that was used to contact homeowners regarding this significant proposal was incredibly insufficient and short-sighted. The circle within that hits 6 homes. That's it. And 2 of them are show homes, currently under the ownership of McDonald Properties. So there's no one in those homes to offer up a comment of opposition. This was always zoned as a short-term rental, and so we have no disagreements on that. But to think that people will be able to rent units on floors 5 and 6 that will tower over the backyard pools down Benchland Drive is a huge concern. Those short-term renters on those upper floors are going to be here for vacation, and they could destroy any privacy we currently have. And indeed, any resident living or staying on those floors will be looking in directly at our backyards and rear exterior windows. And what about the 19.2 meters, which we've now determined tonight is higher than that? Last time it was 18 meters. And then of course we all learned that wasn't correct. And despite planning and development presenting 18 meters and suggesting it was only 5 feet or less than the height of the planning and development employee presenting the variance, we all then went down the path that it was actually 19.2 meters. And interestingly enough, it was caught by the same astute counselor tonight that it's actually higher than 19.2. At no time prior to the presentation by planning and development and the discovery of the true number being 19.2 in that last meeting, did the developer stop everyone and say it's really 19.2 meters. They had every opportunity to clear that up immediately, and they chose not to. How can that bring any level of trust and comfort between the applicant and the district? And what about things such as air conditioning units and rooftop HVAC? How high will that make this structure? I'd like to say to council that you're being asked to relax conditions set out previously in the 2012 master plan for this area. I'd ask council to remember why the height was capped at 16.5 meters then, and to remember the importance of that decision. Why 8 years later council is considering changing this when all relevant information regarding the variant has not been presented to them. Yeah, you must consider the variance submission, and clearly this has cost the district money to examine this and present the findings via PED, but it all falls well short of where it needs to be for it to be considered. The applicant has not provided designs of any other buildings for this lot. There's no design of a 4-story building. There's no design of a 5-story building. There's no design of any building that fits under the 16.5 meter height restriction. They could use additional technology to try to improve what we can see about this. But you know, they're sending you pictures of drones from distances, and we can't determine the height of those drones. There's no bearings there to say that. They could have used augmented reality to try to design things to show an actual 3D scape of this from ground level and how it affects all the homes and surrounding areas. The 4-story building was always the plan on Lot 94. And all of a sudden, that plan isn't any good. So we need to go higher, and this improves profitability for the builder. And I got to tell you, as a person who lives right down that street, 3 houses from the corner, all of this extra retail is absolutely distressing to envision. We will be facing tremendous amounts of people visiting this spot and impeding on the privacy of the home. And they've done nothing beyond that to make us feel better about that. I've never been contacted by them. There's no aspect of privacy walls or anything being installed to try to help people, possibly. But the fact of the matter remains, I really would hope that the councillors will look at this and say, yeah, it's a beautiful building that they've designed, but they could also build a very beautiful 5-story or a beautiful 4-story, and would fit under the 16.5, and it wouldn't invade the privacy of our properties. So I hope you'll stick with the plan from 2012 and realize what this is all about, because they can't even give you numbers yet on what they want to charge for units. And for them to sit there and say they don't have those numbers at this point, that's inconceivable.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Koza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is precisely the reason I got involved in this politics, was the developments like this that were happening in our community. If we look up at the lakes, we'll see there's a very shortage of parking, and the people up there are complaining and complaining and complaining, and that is going to be our future, is a lack of parking. There's many things about this development that I find are lacking. I find that your presentation was great. The depiction of the building you want to build was great. You had it built very nicely. I didn't like when it showed the two renditions. It showed the 4-story building as just this oblique kind of building, and your guys is this beautiful facade and stuff like that. And it kind of, I didn't like that representation to show like, oh, here's the 4-story, bleak, mundane. Oh, look at our 6-story, how beautiful it is. I was kind of a little upset about that. I do thank you guys for actually having the drones, which I said last time you guys failed on. When I was a child, when I was a kid up there, and I remember one time the cops came when we were having a bush party up there, because someone phoned in from down at the end of Lakeshore Road because they could see our fire, and thought it was a forest fire. So I know why you guys want to develop this and why you want to put people up there, because the view is astronomical. So I know why this development wants to go through. My one problem is, and it was brought to me by the person that lives right to the south of it, and I know you have all your drawings done up and everything, and it's hard to do, but the entrance to the parkade is next to a trail that is next to a person's driveway. And it's just lost on me as to why you would have it there, but I guess the drawing is what it is, but it's just, it seems to me that it's a pinch point where the entrance is to the parkade, and it just doesn't seem to be the proper spot. The other thing that's lost on me is you say if you go to 6 stories, you're going to have 10 times the commercial space, yet you're only going to add 6 extra parking spots. So we're going to have 10 times the commercial space, and we're only going to add 6 extra spots. It seems kind of lost on me, especially when I just said parking, parking, parking. You know, that's why I got involved.
Thank you.
No, I'm not done yet.
You're not done
the other
yet?
thing
Okay.
is that I noticed that you guys pointed out how you put in a nice parking conservation area to the west of the building and stuff like that. Has anyone ever hiked down there? That's a 60-degree slope. I went for a hike down there a few years ago when I was looking at the development and stuff like that, and you can't even walk down over there barely. So it's just, that's lost in me as well. I do have some, if we continue on this track, I do have some names for some of our new future developments, and the future developments should be called congested and backed up and no parking, is what I think that the new development should be called. I don't support this at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Reid. Carry on.
Thank you. I think this is a beautiful development. I mean, I really do think you've done a huge amount of work on the design, and it does look gorgeous. There is no denying that. I do, though, think we do need to look at it with a objective eye. I agree with the comments on the phone and from Councillor Koza. We're being presented by the applicants, lovely as they are, they've done a huge amount of work, but they are trying to get a result. And to that order, they have presented things to me in a certain light. These guys are amazing developers. They can build beautiful buildings. We've seen that. So I agree. The presentation of the 4-story building block is something that when I was working behind the Iron Curtain, you would see in some of the less popular areas of Bulgaria and Romania and places like that. It looks exactly like that, but that's not what they're going to design, because you wouldn't sell it. So to think that that is what we would get if it was a 4-story, these guys and the applicants are in the business of selling homes. They are not going to design a concrete block with no balconies and an unbroken facade, because they wouldn't get past DP guidelines and they wouldn't be selling houses. I think we do need to recognize that there is an element of building high builds you cheaper. And by building high, you also get more Lakeview lots. So there is the fact that this, by building high, the developer is able to get more from the value for the site, because it's just pure economics. So I think we can't not acknowledge that. However, I think from their own presentation, I think there is the opportunity to be the best of both worlds here and get to 5 stories at 6.5 meters, which would solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing coming from the residents. We have not had one letter of support from the residents. We have not had one letter going, yay, more retail space. So that tells me something. If people were in support of this, I think we might have heard more from them. Having said that, I don't think we need to go all the way down to 4 stories and set a limit at that. I think somewhere there is a compromise between the two. And for me, I would like to see if we can get to that and give the developer something of what they're asking for, because they're asking for the moon, and quite rightly so, that's their entitlement. But equally, I think there is a reason in the OCP why we said that development outside of the Main Street area is set to a limit. And I don't think, me as a councillor, I have the mandate, based on what I've seen here, to vary that, because I haven't seen a lot of community support for it. And that's what an OCP is. It's created by the community, and the community has supported 4 stories. It's supported 6.5 meters. We've got a great way of delivering a 5-story building, so I think we should look at that.
Thank you. Councillor Scarrow.
Hi, thank you, sir, for your time. I would like to address the point that the caller made about the development group not presenting a plan for a 4-story building. Well, as Councillor Reid just mentioned, this development group wants to have a 6-story building. So they've invested quite a bit of money in architectural design, quite a bit of money in presentation, quite a bit of money and time in developing this concept. And they understand that it's a gamble. They understand that we can all say no, and they can take that money and kiss it goodbye. To have them, a request for them to present a detailed plan that we would expect for a 4-story building as well as a 6-story building, I forgive the developer for not doing that. And I just wanted to make that point. I don't necessarily agree with Councillor Reid's attempt at limiting this to a 5-story building. I think that would lose most of the advantage that we find with the 6-story building. So I think my support for this variance is still there.
Thank you. Councillor Ireland, and then I'll get Jamie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have to object to Councillor Reid's statement that we have to look at this objectively. That kind of implies that the rest of us aren't looking at it objectively, and that's a bit off, because I think that we're all looking at it objectively. I also disagree with the fact that, you know, you've got a few letters here from a few of the direct residents in that particular neighborhood, but most of the people that live in that neighborhood where I live, that I've discussed this with, and I've discussed this at length with many people who would never write a letter in support of anything, think that the rationale for building a 6-story building is far greater to get that commercial space. They all want to have a coffee shop that they could go to, a restaurant that they could go to, maybe a little grocery store. I think those things are incredibly important. And I think that, you know, I would not support going to a 5-story building. To lose that, you know, the word permeability, that's the fancy word, but I think that's one of the essential parts of that building that makes it look a lot smaller than it really is. And then to lose that commercial space, it's a travesty if we do that. We have a chance to build something that lives up to what it was supposed to be at the very beginning, which was a boutique hotel. And, you know, sure, in 2012, 8 years ago, we set a height limit, never envisioning that this kind of project would come forward. And now, 8 years later, somebody with some foresight has designed this beautiful thing to put in. And I think that that's great. I do kind of agree with Councillor Kozub's comments about parking, but that's something that we're stuck with, because those are parking rules that are put into the zoning. I don't agree with them, but to do that, we'd have to change the whole zoning bylaw to fix that. And that's not a reason to deny this project.
right? Like, parking in the lakes is atrocious, 100%, but they're putting in more parking than this building requires. So, and they're putting underground parking, which is incredibly expensive to do. And I don't think we'll see that replicated in this community again. And that's an extremely positive environmental step to take, to put in underground parking. I mean, ski resorts do it because they demand it, because of snow clearing and those things, but lets you build these great buildings and not have cars and pavement all around you. So I completely support this variance. I think that, you know, they showed what, you know, the fellow that was commenting from lot, I don't know, whatever lot number it was, the last commenter, they showed the view from his property. You can hardly see the building. You can, there's very little difference between the 4 and 6. They're certainly not going to be looking down into his yard. So I completely support it.
Yeah. Councillor McKenzie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thanks for that presentation. That was definitely answered a lot of the questions and concerns we had last time. One thing that we have been asking for is building that was a little more environmentally friendly, and in a 6-story, this does allow a lot less lot coverage. So I like that for sure. The fact that we have parking underneath underground, I also like that as well. I understand the concept of making your presentation to, as I would call it, as a fisherman, I would say bait the hook to suit the fish. And I get that, but when I look at the 6-story building, it's definitely more aesthetically pleasing, and the fact that it gives us more commercial space is something that we've been asking for over and over and over. So this ticks a lot more boxes to the positive than to the negative for me. And I really think that this is something there that we need in that, we need somewhere, and this has been planned there all along. While it might be slightly different, anybody that bought a house there should have understood that they're going to get something in their backyard. So this is about as strategically placed as you're going to get a building of that size. They put it there for a reason. And when it comes to lot coverage, if you're putting a 4-story building right next to the available space, you're going to be looking in somebody's backyard for sure. If you make a 6-story, you're still going to look in that. So I think that is a moot point. And anybody says they're losing privacy either way is probably not quite understanding the view of either one of those. So I'm actually been convinced that this is a good thing for our what we wanted there, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Scarrow.
Sir, are you prepared to accept the motion?
I am.
Motion, I would motion option A, okay, which is approval.
I need a seconder. Councillor McKenzie. Further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, Jamie. I got a motion on the floor, but I can hear from staff.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to get in the way of the deliberations at this point, but with respect to the resolution before council, there was also the addition that had been prepared by the corporate services manager with respect to the fire protection charge, which was to increase it from $24, just to make sure that staff are fully empowered to implement that versus $22 or versus $50. So being very clear on the 24.
Sir, my motion would include corporate directors.
Okay, thank you. And seconder as well? Yeah, $2, 4% instead of 40. All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Councillor Koza, Councillor Reid opposed. Motion carried. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Pardon? Yeah. Silence gives consent. Yeah. I'm not opposed. We only name those opposed. So I have Voted. All right, on to development permits without variances.
No, your worship, I think,
Do we have any?
no, sorry, we go straight to the electronic records management, your worship, which is going to be presented by
First, second, third reading.
Reina.
Yeah. Reina?
Okay.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Scarrow, Councillor Ireland. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. None opposed?
So your worship, the
And
next
Regional
one.
Library Board appointment?
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Scarrow, Councillor Ireland. Those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Councillor Mackenzie, you're on the library board. Do you want to speak? You can't oppose it, no.
I don't think you got the vote. I want to read it.
Your worship, Reina has something to,
Come from the in-camera?
your worship,
Oh,
Reina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just before we get to councillor items, nothing from in camera. Those are just for information, and the rest is for information. I do have one of our youth councillors has stuck with us again. Cassidy Gunn is online, and I don't see Catherine there, but I just wanted to let you know that, so when you get to councillor items, we can we can call her as part of the meeting.
Well, which?
Cassidy
youth
Gunn? Youth councillor Cassidy Gunn, which is online. There she is.
Hey, Ken. Okay. Councillor committees, Park and Rec. Oh, that's all been done. So then we come to councillor items and Councillor Reid, back just in time to be the star.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything specific for Cars Landing, other than just to say, wishing everybody a happy Christmas, a safe Christmas. I know it's going to be one of those Christmases we'll look back on and go, really live in the memory, but I hope everybody is safe and well. And hope everybody who's continuing to work over Christmas and is there for us, you know, as essential workers and with the healthcare professions and police and fire and all of those bus drivers, I just want to say thank you for being there.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I echo those comments from my fellow councillor that very Merry Christmas to all those that have busted their butt to keep us safe. So all is good in Oyama, and I will pass it on.
Thank you. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, if I didn't echo those comments, my wife would kill me. Being a nurse. You know, it'd be nice to say, you know, although we don't have that much COVID in our hospital, it's a very stressful place to work right now. So, you know, let's have some sympathy, and not just the hospital workers. It's the grocery store clerks. It's the people at Starbucks or Timmy's. It's the bus drivers. It's everywhere. And, you know, all these people are keeping our community and our lifestyle going, and we need them to do that. And, you know, we've got to show them a bit of love for doing it. So, you know, just thanks to all you guys for sure. And last weekend, we would have normally been having our Christmas party at Okanagan Center Hall, but
not this year.
Not this year. So looking forward to maybe next year. But I guess we're all gone after tonight. So Merry Christmas to everybody, and everybody stay safe.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Scarrow.
Yeah, of course, Merry Christmas to everyone in Lake Country, and stay safe. I just wanted to mention, I mentioned last week that the Santa bus, of course, or 2 weeks ago was canceled based on COVID. I just wanted to give my accolades to the community of Lake Country. Even without the Santa bus coming, we have collected over $4,000 worth of donations towards the food bank. Great accolades to the Peter Greer School and the parents of Peter Greer and various other businesses around that are too many to mention. So we have made a significant contribution, but it falls short from what we normally would have done. Also, our Stuff a Bus program, where we take buses to some of the larger grocery stores, cannot happen because of the gatherings that would incur. So I really, really beg the community to come forward with some sort of donation in lieu of that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Koza. You good? All right. Councillor Gunn, are you still online?
Your Worship, Councillor Gamble as well.
I beg pardon?
Councillor Gamble.
Oh, yeah, Councillor Gamble.
You were going to forget me, weren't you?
No, never.
Well, everybody said a lot. I certainly want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we are looking forward to 2021 and all the good things that that's going to bring us. I do hope that people will be safe as they can try to get through a tough Christmas and a quiet New Year, which is not what we like or are used to, I'm sure. But also I want to thank the community for its generosity and hopefully that will continue, because there are a lot of people in need and more than we know, people that are struggling in these difficult times. So all the best to everyone.
Thank you. And Councillor Gunn now.
Yeah, I would just like to say Merry Christmas to everyone, especially those who perhaps don't get to be around family. For the food bank, George Elliott will be collecting donations tomorrow and doing our general food tower, we call it. There is something regarding our graduation class I would like to bring to council's attention that I was wondering if we can maybe make it happen somehow. Similar to last year, how the graduation class did not get a normal grad. I was curious to see if there would be a possibility we could put up grad pictures on banners throughout the community to kind of show awareness of our grad class and that we're here and just kind of get us out there a bit.
We're open to any ideas, as we say, as long as you do all the work. That's all.
Will do. I'll get on that right away.
Yeah, sounds good. So, yeah, through public art, and we do have banners that could put all the grads on. Sure. Okay. Good time. Well, and that's it. Okay. Yeah, and Happy New Year, or Great New Year, and Merry Christmas. Do the best you can with in splendid isolation as much as possible. But and good night. We are adjourned.
Night.
Oh, wow. Good job.